Hello and welcome sa special coverage ng Rappler para sa State of the Nation address ni President Rodrigo Duterte ngayong hapon. Now, today's gonna be really different. This is a very different sauna because unlike unlike anything we've experienced, we have a pandemic. The economy is in recession. Millions of Filipinos jobless and hungry, and my co-anchor. uh, Miss Maria Reza. I can't even meet her face to face right now. I'm Ralph Rivas. Keep it right here dito sa Rappler and let's wait and see kung ano ang sasabihin ni President Duterte ngayong hapon. Maria?
Hello, hi everybody. As you can see, we are doing social distancing. Yeah. Let me just lay the context of what 2020. We all have lived through this, so we know what it's like, right? But of course, front and center, COVID-19, a pandemic. It's global. It's in the Philippines. It tests government. It tests its people. We have had a very militaristic, very securities-driven response to it. And you will see that has cascaded onto everything. And I think the second one, there are three things, right? Three in terms of context. The second one is something that we used to call a chilling effect. I would say we're now in Siberia. This kind of push for control of media, control of the narrative, both on social media and in terms of something that we would have thought would have been unthinkable, the shutdown, again, in less than 35 years, of the top broadcaster, ABS-CBN. When that happened on May 5th, we knew we were in for another back to the future. Then finally, the third one is, I call it, the third phase is the consolidation of power, or codification into law of abuses of power that we have seen, right? And the first you can see from our own verdict. I've just been sentenced on June 15th, along with a former colleague, Ray Santos, on cyber libel, a retroactive application of the law, sentenced to up to 6 years in jail for cyber libel. We're, of course, challenging this. And then more beyond that is the anti-terror law. You now have dozens of 19, I believe, at last count, 17, 18, 19 at last count, petitions at the Supreme Court, an anti-terror law that could get anyone, a small group of cabinet secretaries would think is critical, a voice of dissent, that person can be designated a terrorist, arrested without a warrant, and then jailed for up to 24 days. This is a landscape that we've been in. I'm going to toss it back, and you'll see we have a great panel joining us today to take a look at, exactly what President Duterte will have to address in his fifth State of the Nation address, the penultimate one in his 6-year term of office. I'll toss it back to you, Ralph. Go ahead and introduce. Let's introduce everyone.
Yeah, for this afternoon, we have several panelists. We have veteran journalist and Rappler editor-at-large Marcus Vitog, economist and Rappler columnist JC Punong Bayan to walk us through about the state of the economy. And of course, we have Dr. Tony Liachon, former advisor to the IATF for COVID-19. Medyo jam-packed yung panel natin ngayon, and they will give us all the insights, all the figures that we need to learn. But before we talk to them, let me toss it to Pia Renada to walk us through what we should expect this afternoon. Hi, Pia.
Hi, Ralph. Hi, everyone. Well, what we can expect today is obviously the speech of the president, and Malacanang has already set our expectations high because they promise Duterte will unveil an economic recovery plan, and that's something everyone is waiting for because obviously jobs are on the line, lives are on the line, and we really want to hear a clear and concrete plan from Duterte himself on what his government will do months from now and in the days to come. So that's one. We're also expecting a long speech. PCOO Chief Martin Andanar already said that Duterte's written speech, the written form of his speech, is 1 hour and 20 minutes long if you read it without ad-lib. So obviously, we know that the president only once did he really stick to his speech, his written speech, and we can definitely expect him to veer off. It's just a matter of by how much, like how will it extend by another hour or just a few minutes? So that's something we'll see. We're also expecting him to mention priority legislation for Congress, and among these will be economic measures which his economic team wants passed in relation to the COVID-19 response as well. So another thing we can expect to see is a very different SONA, because we know that there's very limited attendance due to the COVID-19 restrictions. So we know that not everyone in Batasan not everyone in Congress gets to attend, and not even the whole cabinet of the president. So we've seen photos of the officials waiting for the president, and they're a very small group. So far we know that there are 8 cabinet secretaries who are attending. There's supposed to be a total of 15. So we've seen around 8 to 11 faces already in Batasan Pambansa, waiting for the president, and a few lawmakers as well. So it's a very small, close-knit event compared to before. And we will also see if the president will follow the protocols, the health protocols. Will he come wearing a mask? We don't know. How will the setup be? How will the podium look like given this COVID-19 era SONA? We're also waiting to see if the president's speech will be different in any way to his late night public addresses during COVID-19. Kasi we've seen a lot of his addresses, and while he touches on certain aspects of the pandemic, nakita rin natin that he would often veer away from that topic and rant against critics, rant against the opposition or certain politicians, and make threats against certain people, may mga ad hominem remarks. So we'll see if his communication team succeeded in convincing him to stick to the script and to be more presidential, and to be clear and more focused on the pandemic and other pressing issues the country is facing.
Okay, thanks Pia. I'm sure marami kang aabangan, like kung sino-sino yung mga officials na pinili niya to be with him. Ako personally, aabangan ko talaga kung ano yung economic stimulus plan, kasi we don't know how much the government will spend for the fiscal stimulus, and the economy business community is waiting. But before we talk about the economy, this is a very different time na, kasi di ba every year naabangan natin yung mga protests when it comes to the State of the Nation address. But this time with the pandemic, it changed everything, and with the shutdown of ABS, as Maria mentioned. So I want to ask Ma'am Marites, your thoughts about this, about the protests and the pandemic. Ano yung mangyayari with this?
If it were normal time, ang expectation, madami talagang tao na magproprotesta. If it were normal time, also the trigger is ABS-CBN shutdown. As the SWS survey showed, it's a hugely popular issue, meaning majority of the respondents are in favor of keeping ABS-CBN on the air. So may trigger dito sa leading up to the SONA, plus the anti-terror law, as Maria mentioned earlier. So personally naman, or maybe other people, we want a clear roadmap. How do we get out of this runaway transmission, where we have now more than 80,000 confirmed cases, and in Southeast Asia, we have the most number of active cases. Philippines and Indonesia have the highest mortality death rate. So, yun, unang-una, roadmap to get out of this COVID-19 runaway transmission. And as you said, Ralph, economic roadmap as well.
So, itong dissent kay Duterte, parang ito on the previous years, parang hindi natin ito nakikita eh. 'Di ba? Parang Duterte has been enjoying high satisfaction ratings in the previous years. But this time around, do you think naka-apekto tong pandemic, or do people still believe in him?
Kasi we haven't seen any survey yet, no? However, there are indications. For example, there's this global survey done by YouGov. It's a UK-based outfit, and they asked the question about satisfaction with your government performance in containing the virus. Ang lumabas is that the Philippines is one of the lowest has one of the lowest satisfactory rates. 33% are satisfied with the way the government has been handling the virus. So is this an we used to be 57% satisfied. It was a bit high. And then we went down to 33% in was this late June or early July. So hindi it remains to be seen if this is related to his popularity as president. So yun lang ang nakikita kong isang indication na the numbers may change when we see the new surveys, if there are new surveys.
Let me just pull into the conversation si Lian Buwan. Si Lian kasi our Justice reporter, galing siya sa protest kanina. So kumusta sa ground, Lian?
It's very energetic. The energy was very palpable. The crowd estimate has just come in. It's pegged at 8,000 to 10,000, and that's many, considering that there's a pandemic. And I found naman that there was a really physical distancing. But what is most noteworthy about this, its name is So Nagkaisa, diba? And they opened it with a very vibrant congratulations sa sama-sama nating pagkilos. So it's really a united SONA. And for the first time in a long time, we saw the different groups of the opposition that we know is very fractured. Pero nagsama-sama sila. And I've been told that ang pre-planning nito galing kina Senator Pangilinan, and then the leaders from the church like Bishop Pabilio and Sister Mary John Mananzan, Brother Armin Lubistro, and then napull in na the leaders of the left. Renato Reyes was there, Nery Colmenares was there, the Makabayan lawmakers were there. So every personality of the opposition na dati makikita mong holding rallies at different points all came together kanina.
So, ano ba Lian? Pwede pa ba magprotesta? Do we expect an extravagant an art show later? Sunugan ng FAG? Things like that?
Walang ganon. For one, limited kasi yung permit ng government. They only allowed the protesters to hold the rally inside UP Dalaman. Tapos yung permit, so that's debatable. Pero pumayag na lang sila because kesa naman wala. So it's just UP, and we talked to the organizers. Nag-end yung rally kanina at 12. Yun lang talaga. So for the first time also in a very, very long time, wala nang protest that is simultaneous with the SONA. That's also because, yun nga, takot na yung mga taong magstay behind ng ganun katagal, may pandemic. And ang mangyayari is there's gonna be a streamed concert sa Radyo Katipunan. So these are artists who will sing resistance songs expectedly. So yun. So the sonas that we know before, yung burning of effigy, yung talagang the grand protests while the president speaking is wala this year, but the organizers will tell you that even though it's limited, the resistance is never before, like it's never before.
Yeah, so yun nga yung kakaiba ngayon, no? Parang mahirap magprotesta, mahirap lumabas. But I want to ask Dr. Tony, gaano ba ka-risky yung protests in sa pagkalat nitong virus? Is there a safe way to protest and demand to government kung ano yung mga kailangan gawin?
Well, ang protest natin ngayon very unique kasi you cannot actually hold very huge gatherings katulad nito. And then as we speak right now, umuulan ngayon I'm leaving, my house is here in Commonwealth. And then it's very difficult kasi you know naman that the transmission of the virus nagkakaroon ka ng mga second wave infection pagka umuulan ka. It's one of the things na binabantayan when you have an epidemic. The importation risk that is coming from OFWs. Nangyari yan sa Singapore. Once the Singapore epidemic was controlled, they opened their borders. And then nag-zoom up sila to number 1. But right now, the Philippines is number 1. Ang inaabangan the typhoons. Kasi we will have multiple typhoons, mga 22 typhoons a year. And that will be a problem considering yung social distancing magkakaproblema. And then there will be increases in cases of flu and pneumonia and even dengue fever, which may actually have a problem with us in terms of differential diagnosis, magkakaroon tayo ng problema sa differential diagnosis. And how do you separate right now yung mga COVID cases and then separate those who will be affected by the typhoons, pupunta sila ngayon sa evacuation centers. So, yun ang different context na nakikita ko. But I see din the SONA as an important venue for health. In fact, sabi nga ni Maria, this is one of the most important. In fact, sa akin, the penultimate SONA is the most important one. Number one, because it will talk about health and economy. I think 70% be health because the economy will follow. And ang unique dito, the virus dictates the outcome. Solving these two major issues will define the presidency of President Duterte and the legacy as an authentic leader. Now, he has to ask these basic questions regarding this. Kung masosolve mo ba yung COVID crisis? Kasi if in the first 100 days hindi na-solve yan while other countries have solved it in 3 months, particularly China, only according to Marites, only Indonesia and Philippines ang hindi nag-flatten ng curve. So therefore, very challenging right now. So we are right now number 1 in Southeast Asia for the active cases. We have active cases 52, present cases natin 80. The UP Octa Research Group predicted that we will be at 85,000 at end July and 2,000 cases. By August, according to Professor Guido David of UP, we will be reaching 140,000 and 4,000 deaths. If this will be unabated, I think this should be very, very important for all of us. So in the context of health, I don't see any glimmer of hope unless otherwise they would change, of course, the leadership at the IATF and health agency. Now, for the information of everyone, kung hindi po alam, ang head po kasi ng IATF is the Secretary of Health. And the Secretary of Health, of course, Secretary Duque, and the chairman of the board, of course, of PhilHealth is also Secretary Duque. So right now, he is overwhelmed and overburdened. And I think there should be a sense of urgency and focus on how to deal with an epidemic. So I'll stop there so that you know the context right now. It's all about, to me, the president defers to the Secretary of Health for the health issues, and even the cabinet members, the military generals, who are working right now in the IATF, would defer their decisions to the Secretary of Health. So very, very important ang role ng Secretary of Health.
Dr. Leotron, I mean, you actually have an insider's view in this. You had a look at it right from the inside. One of the things the government doesn't really deal with well are checks and balances. So building a system with checks and balances, I think that's what you pointed out, that essentially Secretary Duque is doing not only too many things, but that there are no other alternative views. Tell us what it was like inside, and then give us an assessment of how we, the Philippines, have done in dealing with COVID-19.
Okay. So for the information po ng audience natin, the National Action Plan, that's the whole plan of the government, is headed by the Secretary of Defense, that's Secretary Delfin Lorenzana. And the Vice Chair of the National Action Plan is Secretary Eduardo Año of the DILG. Now, this will actually be divided into the IATF, which is actually the body that will create the guidelines to be implemented by the chief implementer, that's Secretary Galvez, the National Task Force. And I report to Secretary Galvez together with Dr. Ted Herbosa, the Executive Vice President of UP, and Dr. Emmanuel Bueno, who was the former medical director of East Avenue. So we provide the medical expertise to Secretary Galvez. But the main problem here, Secretary Galvez has been given full authority, has been given full responsibility, but has not been given full authority on communications. And the communications will only be coming from the palace, to the presidential spokesperson, of course, to Secretary Duque. But there are certain issues na nagkakaproblema ako. For example, number one, yung when he was asked in the Senate about second wave. So ang unang tatawagan diyan, the advisor of the National Task Force. So sumagot ako even without clearance, eh. But eventually, tinama naman ng palace ni Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea and Secretary uh, Lorenzana, and of course, Secretary, the spokesperson, Harry Roque. The second one is the asymptomatic cases na walang transmission. So I have to speak up. And the last one, yung sinabing flatten ng curves. Now, hindi ako pwede mag-wait noon because the public is waiting for an accurate medical answer. Doon ako nagka-problema kasi there's a bottleneck in terms of communication. And I think in an epidemic, even in clinical practice, transparent and candid communication is important. And sense of urgency, as a cardiologist, my guiding principle is to have a sense of urgency, be transparent with your patient, and then meet them, and then straight from the shoulder, sabihin mo yung problema. So that does not sit well, of course, with the presidential spokesperson and Secretary Duque. So just for transparency, I was asked by Secretary Galvez na umalis because of that particular problem. You know, that's the real truth on nangyari. It's just because I communicated without asking approval from them. But there are certain issues na kailangan sumagot po tayo so that we can actually inform the public po. And the public deserves a clearer explanation and accompanied with sense of urgency.
So what you just described as politics getting in the way of medicine, getting in the way of what the nation needs to do. But let me ask you something. Who is ultimately in charge? What you describe, when you describe a whole chart, that can be okay during normal times, but when it's a crisis situation, it needs to be quick, be fast. You've talked about this. Strategic communications needs to go to the people. How would you? Who is really truly in charge, and where do you see us going?
Well, the one in charge, of course, is the president. That's an old adage, no? The buck stops at the president. Pero ang reporting system is like this, eh. We have daily meetings at the IATF and the National Task Force. And then every 2 weeks, they will evaluate the system, whether they will change the quarantine classifications. And then that will be the time, siguro 3 or 4 days before the president would announce yung change in the quarantine. So definitely, everything would be decided upon by the top leaders. Usually ang umaattend, because I had the opportunity to attend naman 2 meetings. The first with the former health secretaries, and the last one July 15 with the academic group. The mainstays na umaattend, Secretary Duque, Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque, Secretary Galvez, Secretary Lorenzana, and Secretary Eduardo Año, and Senator Bongo. And then there will be some guests depending on the topic. Like last time, the topic was on education. So they invited CHED Chair Popoy de Vera and Professor Liling Briones. So depende who dun sa topic. And of course, nandun si Secretary Bello for some labor. And then they will decide. So the first one who spoke was Professor Ranjit Don, discussing, kasi naka-GCQ tayo, their proposal was modified ECQ. My proposal was ECQ, but since ang economy walang pera and funding, for at least for 2 weeks, but the Metro Manila mayors actually lobbied kay Secretary Ed Año and Secretary Galvez. So nag-status quo tayo for almost 1 month. And predictably, tataas yun kasi wala tayong modifications. With the modified ECQ, we expect that the operation of the government and processing will about 50%. With the current GCQ, that's about 75%. But we see that after almost 2 weeks or 1 month ng GCQ, hindi nag-increase. Kaya ko nasabi sana ECQ because when Secretary Simatu went to Cebu in the 3rd week of June, the reproductive number, ang normal less than 1, was 2. Bumaba na ngayon to 1.1 ang Cebu. So I think effective yung ECQ. Right now, the quarantine classification for Cebu is MACQ. So I think it's effective sana. But because the economy right now plays an important factor, they settled as a group, as a GCQ, and the president decides on the GCQ. Ganun po ang process po, as I was observing.
But truly,
No,
the
Doc
concern
Tony,
about the economy doesn't matter, right? If health doesn't happen, the concern about the economy won't matter if we don't get the pandemic correctly.
That's correct. Kasi we don't, sa playbook kasi, in most of the books na nabasa ko, whether the Ebola outbreak, the South Korea, the Vietnam model, you have first to settle muna yung testing sa detection, contact tracings before even you talk about economy. So the hammer and dance concept by Thomas Pei, the social writer, we missed the bus eh. We missed the opportunity during the first nating lockdown. Sana during the time of the lockdown, we would have actually constructed yung mga testing center, contact tracing, isolation. But we were late then eh. In other countries, they anticipated that because they have experience with the SARS and the H1N1. Without the benefit of the lockdown, ang ginawa nila, they started with testing and contact tracing. That's why Vietnam, despite a poorer country, 10 times lower than our GDP, zero deaths eh. And then almost 360 cases lang together with other countries na zero deaths. So, ang missed opportunities natin was actually when we declared that on March 15. Dapat dun tayo nagmabilis eh. But we only appointed the SARS, let's say for testing, the Secretary Dizon, for isolation, Secretary Villar, contact tracing, Secretary Mayor Magalong, and then for treatment center, the new Undersecretary Leopoldo Beca. So we're doing this in the midst of crisis when it's almost 80,000. We should have done that way before, during the March imposition of the ECQ.
So, Doc Tony, what's your proposal? Do another lockdown? And if so, how long?
Considering kasi sa ECQ, you will need social amelioration funds eh. And that's actually should be in the bayanihan eh. Kung 2 weeks lang naman, you need the surgical knife here eh, kahit 2 weeks lang, so that you can stop and arrest the viral spread eh. But if they could not settle for an ECQ, which may actually be against the proposal ng economic managers, I would settle ideally for an MECQ. Kasi I feel we're on the verge of health collapse eh. All the hospitals are full. A lot of patients are calling na walang rooms eh. And right now, kaya lang hindi natin nakikita na mamatay ang mga pasyente at doktor because we are more prepared than in March. Kasi yung infrastructures natin halfway through it eh. So medyo yung learning curve natin nahabol na natin. But if we will be not addressing that, nag 140,000 tayo by August, hindi makakaya ng ating mga doktor na. Pagod na po yung mga doktor. So pagka nag-collapse yung hospitals at saka yung mga doktor, domino principle yan. And then economic recession will happen. Yan ho ang nakikita ko pong scenario dito. So as a doctor, I have to arrest the bleeding. The bleeding right now is in the local transmission kasi you open up eh. So mobility plays an important factor here. So pag nag-ease down ka, mobility. Eh ngayon, since asymptomatic ang 50%, hindi mo alam kung sinong meron or hindi. And the testing's results will come, let's say, after 5 days or 7 days bago malaman. And the people are, walking, naglalakad sila, hindi mo alam, meron na pala sila. Kaya ang request ngayon ng mga RT-PCR, by families eh. Ang pag-request dati, single lang. Makikita mo affected ngayon families. That's why, in clusters, in cloisters, in jails, in groups, ganyan maramihan ang problema. Because you're talking here right now of a massive local transmission.
But Dr. Liachon, if you're proposing a modified ECQ for 2 weeks, what can the IATF and the NATF do in 2 weeks that they haven't done in the past 4 months? Anong
Yeah,
magagawa nila
kaya
in 2 weeks?
that's a very brilliant question. Kaya ang feeling ko ang quarantine will not work right now. Ang salita nga dito ng favorite kong epidemiology si Dr. Benji kung matira matibay na dito. Kasi masyado na madami para i-control eh. Ibig sabihin
Doctor, yeah. I'm sorry, but we have had barangay health volunteers since the 80s or 70s. Thailand tapped all their million volunteers. Short of contact tracing. Bakit ho hindi natin natatap yun? Nag-hire pa tayo ng contact tracers. We could add to their allowance. So, ang daming pwedeng gawin, but it's not in the agenda of the IATF. Have you discussed this yung using health volunteers?
Well, nireview ko yan eh. When I entered actually dun sa NTF ITF, nagkaroon ho ng plenary doon eh. I was able to present on the third day of my appointment. And Secretary Anyo nandun, kumpleto sila. So I presented several reference models dito. Ang pinaka-importante ho dito is basically yung learnings from the past eh. Enlistment of other experts and yung sinasabi nyo. Kaya lang ho kasi, based on that, may summary po itong mga reference models eh. Tatlo po ang summary. It's about leadership and governance of the IATF. Number 2 is a sense of urgency and a coordinated response. And then number 3 is they're being open also to suggestions coming from the medical experts because this is a health and global pandemic eh. So therefore, the people na dapat nilang nire-recruit right now are people from the medical community who can add substance and of course researches. Kasi this is a global pandemic, mas dapat nating mag-recruit tayo ng mga medical experts rather than people na there are many, they have done their share, mga military generals and all. But to a certain extent, kahit yung mga SARS na in-appoint, wala silang medical background eh. It's only Leopoldo Vega meron and you cannot actually lead a global pandemic without the medical experts on board. Yun ho ang tingin ko. And dito dapat multi-sectoral approach na ho ito. Hindi ho kakaya kahit Hubizar ka dyan without the support of the medical community. The Syntax Coalition starting since 2012, kaya successful po yun. Kasi meron hong organized group po ng medical community and the government eh. This is a pandemic. Dapat more pa tayo nagre-recruit ng private sector. Particular, ang dami hong nagwe-wait. PMA, gusto nilang sumama. The Philippine College of Physicians. Many medical groups ang gustong sumama. But hindi ho natatap at this point in time. So your question is valid ho.
Now, let me just go back dun sa point ni Dr. Tony, no, that on the lockdown, na kung pwedeng 2 weeks. Now, I want to ask JC, kakayanin ba na ng ekonomiya natin na mag-lockdown ulit for at least 2 weeks? And if so, ano yung mga kailangan ng mga in place na mga tulong para sa, especially those sa mga talagang maapektuhan?
So I agree, Ralph, completely with the point of Doc Tony that we should go back to stricter quarantine restrictions. When it comes at this point, I think it's safe to say na talagang we have to prioritize the health crisis before the economic crisis. Now, and just to give you a scale of how deep we are into the economic crisis, we're coming into this. We have right now the country's first recession since the Asian financial crisis in 1998. And in fact, for the first quarter of 2020, the country's output went down by 0.2%. And economists are thinking that this might be even worse in the second quarter. Unemployment has also reached a record high. As much as 80.9 million jobs were shed throughout the economy from January to April alone. And hunger is also at its highest since 2014. Now, when it comes to this, I have to say that this could have been totally avoided had the government acted early enough. And you need only look at the case of Vietnam, for example, which acted very early to address the pandemic as early as late January, early February. They were developing test kits. They have stringent quarantine. They have admirable contact tracing capabilities. And they also imposed a nationwide lockdown on April 1, but they were able to lift it just after 3 weeks. And since then, the Vietnamese economy is well on its way to recovery. Mobility is up and going back to pre-COVID levels. So I think that's the fundamental point about this, that this economic crisis could be totally avoidable. But I'm afraid to say that we've come past the point of no return, so to speak. And we just have to make do with what we have. But even then, another thing I wanted to say is that the economic managers are scrimping needlessly. They're not spending enough for economic aid for workers, for businesses, and also for the poor. If you look, for example, at the social amelioration program, that was good for only 2 months, April and May, and even now they're not yet finished distributing the aid for May. And aside from that, we're still waiting for the economic recovery plan of the
Okay, so
Okay,
JC,
go ahead.
nag-free si JC. But
May chilling
balikan natin.
Sorry.
Nako. So balikan natin
Ang
si
hirap
JC
na hindi tayo
maya-maya, no?
magkasabay.
Yeah,
Go, Ralph.
exactly. But let me just loop in our health reporter, Sofia Toma Cruz. She has the latest figures. She's also going to give us insights kung papaano nga ba binibigay ng yung data ng government, as well as her observations basically on how the government is reporting this coronavirus pandemic. Sofia?
Right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, as for the latest figures, as of yesterday, we know that cases already have breached the 80,000 mark. So, we're at around 8,448 cases, as you see on the screen, and nearly 2,000 deaths. Now, one thing that's important to note here is, of course, this shows that there has been a rise in cases, particularly in Metro Manila, because of the 80,000 confirmed cases, the newly reported cases, 10,000 came from Metro Manila alone. So that goes back to what Dr. Liachan was saying a while ago about the need to perhaps recalibrate our quarantine restrictions in the capital region. Also because, yes, while when we ask, of course, officials what could be behind the spread, why are cases still increasing, they always refer to two things. One being that there is still significant community transmission, which means the virus is spreading among the community. It's hard to pinpoint the specific source, which makes so many things difficult, like contact tracing and breaking those transmission chains. But then, aside from increased community transmission, there's also what they say is increased testing capacity. But then, when we hear that, you have to take into context that that can't explain for the rise in cases alone, because as we know, when we look at other figures, let's say the critical care capacity, nationwide, we're at around 50% utilization rate. And while that's not, let's say, danger zone, when you zoom into Metro Manila, that's already at some 70%. So our hospitals are really feeling the strain of the rise in cases. And again, that goes back to what many public health experts have been observing, and what hospitals themselves have been saying. I think a few weeks ago, or just in the past few weeks alone, we've been hearing hospitals declaring that they're at capacity. So, even if they say that there's still enough beds and everything, the reality on the ground doesn't really match that. And apart from hospitals feeling the strain, just yesterday, when DOH released their weekly situation report, the positivity rate, or the share of people who were testing positive for coronavirus, so even if testing is expanding, the people who are actually testing positive is growing higher too. In the last week, we were at some 11% for positivity rate. That's just the week alone, but collectively nationwide, it's around 8%. but still, that's an increase from the 7% we saw weeks ago, and that's a really alarming figure because the ideal situation is that when you're testing more, you should have your positivity rate going down. So
Going down.
these are all indications that we see the virus is still spreading. And as you mentioned, Ralph, like on top of all that, no, there are backlogs in testing and in validation that kind of um don't paint the clearest picture of where the virus is really at, what it's like in real time, and that of course hampers our response.
So, ikaw ba, when you ask for data or the reporters ask for data, is that readily available? Or ano sa tingin mo yung problems in sa pagbibigay ng datos, Sophia?
Well, to be fair to the Department of Health, it's readily available when you ask. But the thing is, these things again aren't happening in real time, right? So when you look at things like reproduction rates, those are reproduction numbers, are the number of people that one confirmed case can infect. That's still, again, looking back at the last 2 weeks. That's based on something that's been computed for in the last 2 weeks, and same goes with other key figures. So I think the caveat is that even if you ask for data and it's readily available, things aren't happening in real time, and so there really is that lack of transparency of data that a lot of people have been pointing out since. I mean, it's not even a new issue, right? It's been around since May, perhaps around May, April, May, and so yeah, that's really one thing that still hampers our understanding of where we're at now at this point in the pandemic.
What we've
Now,
seen
Dr.
in
Tony,
some of the
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah.
no,
Ralph?
no, Maria, go ahead. Sige.
Bringing it back, I mean, what we've
Yeah.
certainly seen
I
is
just
that
like
people who I was going to bring you in. What we've seen is that people who don't bring good news to President Duterte seem to soften it. Maritas just pointed out that Lenny Robredo actually wrote a letter that showed that there was a lack of transparency in the government data. Dr. Tony, thank you for speaking up, protecting the public health. What you described is alarming to me because if politics gets in the way of health, and the ultimate decision maker is President Duterte, how are the facts going to get to him so that he can make the right decision, at least to prevent a wider outbreak?
So during the last time na nag-present ako sa Malacanang July 15, with transparency sinabi ko yung problem eh. Ang problem is you need to arrest the cases right now because kung di mo i-arrest yan, doon pumunta yung suggestion ko na dapat free yung mass eh. The social behavior, maaaring nabe-blame natin. I don't think the people are not behaving. It's just that the urban poor, which is responsible for a major chunk of the local transmission, pagkain nga wala silang mabili, mass pa kaya and alcohol. And then arawan sila. So they have to pay for, a lot of things. So dun sabi ko, ang suggestion ko, we have to, part of the bayanihan and yung bibigay nating funding should actually be put on the prevention aspect to arrest the cases, that is face mask, alcohol, and all of these preventive measures to protect the poor. So yan ang una. Because if you will not arrest kasi the cases, these asymptomatic cases will go to their houses and then infect their parents, and that will crowd, of course, again, overwhelm the healthcare system. So it has to have a preventive approach. And then fast track natin yung testing and turn around right now para you isolate the sick and the healthy para makapasok. That's the dance concept. And then contact tracings right away. Now, ang National Capital Region with Region 4A would comprise 67% of the financial epicenter. Pero because of their contiguity to Region 4A and Calabarzon, may danger dyan kung hindi ka magbo-border control for the National Capital Region. It might spread again to the Northern Luzon. And then mentioned in Sophia is the positivity rate. Well, we recognize the efforts of the testings right now. Nag-increase na yung testings natin from dati 22,000, may report na 30,000. Pero the more you test, the more din makikita mo meron. Pero ang normal value recommended by the WHO is less than 5%. Ang positivity rate natin pumapalo ngayon sa 12%. So, ibig sabihin may local transmission ka. And the critical utilization rate, which is defined as the number of ventilators, beds, and isolation area, nasa danger zone na based on the definition of the Department of Health, 70%. And ang recovery rate natin mababa because we don't count kasi those outpatient individuals na gumagaling na. We don't have that mechanism. Unlike other countries, they monitor on an outpatient. Ang nare-record lang natin yung lalabas hospital. Eh, siyempre, kokonti yun. And then, I have seen somebody or some people stonewalling right now yung okay lang yan, yung deaths. Sa akin, hindi okay ng death eh. Kasi one death is too many. And then they mentioned the case fatality rate na mababa tayo as compared with other countries or global. Pero let me explain that. So ang definition ng case fatality rate is the number of deaths over the number of cases. So mababa tayo, let's say 2.9% tayo. Pero in the real world, ang dami kayang namamatay na COVID. Pero dahil pagpunta nila emergency room, wala nang opportunity for testing. Walang opportunity for testing. Eh, ang positive, ang pag-define mo niyan, dapat positive ka sa RT-PCR. Number two, many patients die na hindi lumalabas pa yung test. So, I think nasa thousands siyang, kung bibilangan mo, siguro 4,000 or to 5,000 na namamatay ang aking kalkulasyon. Namamatay lang na hindi ma-diagnose na positive ng RT-PCR dahil they will come to the emergency room, toxic na. And then, siyempre, ang turnaround time ng results, wala. Pangalawa, ang testing hindi libre in the Philippines. In other countries, libre. Imagine mo for a country, wala tayong ceiling or a cap. One hospital would, imagine 17,000, iba 10,000, iba 8,000, 6,000. The lowest is 2,500 at San Miguel. So dapat, sa akin part of the gagawin ng Congress, and the Congress has been very irrelevant. They have been discussing topics na hindi related sa COVID, mabuti pa ang Senate. So they wasted so much time in crafting a COVID bill na magbibigay sana ng libreng testing, libreng face mask, and then support Mayor Magalong sa contact tracings because this would need money. 30 billion is projected for the contact tracing. Kaya tayo delay So ini project management team. Pag wala kang human resources, wala kang pera, wala lahat yun. And that's the reason why we're delayed. Dapat whole of government Ang nangyari, ang Congress wasted 2 months without helping right now the country instead of helping. Kasi in some areas na pinupuntahan ko, maraming progressive thinkers na congressman na tumutulong with the governors and the mayors And the other thing na nakita ko, hindi naka one page ang mga LGU. Kaya there are bright spots mga si Mayor Rex Gatchalian, Vico, Yorme. But sana, after each meeting sana, all the provincial governors and mayors, ito ang blueprint natin, and then cascade that, ito ang money nyo. I don't see that So sana, maisabi yan during this particular SONA.
Yeah, speaking of money, JC, you're back na, no? So, JC, do you think that the government is spending enough for this pandemic? And if not, magkano ba yung kailangan gastusin? What are your thoughts on the fiscal stimulus packages proposed in Congress right now?
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say, Ralph, that the government is not spending nearly enough to abate the economic crisis that we are in. So, for example, if you look at the social amelioration program or emergency subsidies for people, that was good only for 2 months, April and May, and they're still not finished distributing the aid for May. And aside from that, we're still waiting for the economic rescue packages from Congress that up until now they still haven't passed. President Duterte still hasn't signed, and this economic aid should have been given early on because we don't want businesses dying left and right. Because if we allow that to happen, there won't be any economic recovery to speak of later. And right now, I think
yeah. Yeah, JC, let me just cut you right there. No, magkaiba yung proposal ng Senate at House. House of Representatives 1.3 trillion. Senate is just 140 billion because 'di ba parang sinasabi ni Finance Secretary Sunny Dominguez, parang tali din in a way tali yung kamay nila because of the legal aspects of na hindi pwedeng itrato na revenue source ang loans, 'di ba? So ano sa tingin mo, sapat na ba yung 140 or ano ba yung tama ba yung interpretation ng economic managers on the laws about it?
Yung 140 billion, Ralph, that's so super kulang. Kulang na kulang talaga yan compared to the magnitude of the economic crisis that we are in. I'm more in line with the proposal of some lawmakers in the House of Representatives. Yung 1.4 trillion is much closer to the economic aid that we need right now in terms of, for example, wage subsidies, zero interest loans for businesses, etc. Now, tama ka na sinasabi ng economic managers, they're overly concerned with the deficit and the debt. Pero ang analogy na naisip ko dito, Ralph, ay for the longest time, we've been saving for the rainy day in terms of macroeconomic fundamentals, etc., a low debt to GDP ratio. But now that we are in the rainy days, why are we not spending nearly enough to abate the suffering of our people? So I think this concern for the deficit and debt is misplaced. Secretary Dominguez of the Department of Finance has said that they don't want to exceed a certain limit when it comes to the deficit to GDP ratio and debt to GDP ratio. But even now, they are signing new loans from multilateral agencies left and right, almost 400 billion pesos in new loans in just the past month. And I think it's time to spend that. We have to spend that as soon as possible. And I'm really not understanding why we are not spending enough.
Okay, so we have live shots now of the upcoming State of the Nation address of President Duterte. Andun si House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano and Senator Tito Soto. Kita nyo naman may social distancing. Not everyone's gonna be there. Piling-pili lang din kung sino-sino. So it would be interesting kung sino yung kung titingnan natin mamaya kung sino-sino yung a-attend physically at sino lang yung virtually kasi I assume that speaks a lot, no, kung sino yung nandyan personally. Now I want to ask Ma'am Marites, with this pandemic, anong observations mo in on how people are taking the government into account or how kung paano pinapanagot ng mga tao ng gobyerno? Tell us about the creative ways and do you think effective ba to?
Well, on social media, we're seeing a citizens group trying to track how the budget for COVID-19 response is being spent. Pero sabi nga nila, kulang data from the government. For example, I remember during Typhoon Haiyan, major disaster, there was all the donations, all the loans were on an online portal. We could just go and check how much money was coming in. So I got reminded about this when I read the very detailed letter of Vice President Rodrigo suggesting a similar online portal. So, ilagay lahat doon, loans, donations, how much is being spent where. Alam, very simple para madali nating ma-access because that helps keeping the government then to account. And yun nga sinabi ni, and also for example, Department of Health, mahirap kasi na virtual ang briefing. You cannot ask questions directly. You have to email. Sometimes ini-ignore daw, but I think they've been relatively open, as Sophia says. So for example, in the beginning, they talked of 18 clusters ng infections. So they knew na pala na we had 18 clusters in March or April. How come hindi na contain yung 18 clusters? And I've been trying to get data on saan ba tong 18 clusters like Japan. They mapped out the clusters and they were able to stop it. So anyway, it all goes back to leadership. I think we've been seeing how incompetent and inept the leadership of the IATF is. And that also shows how the president is unable to unite all of us, get data scientists, get epidemiologists, as Dr. Leachon said, get more people involved, and then we're seeing the president about to land.
Ayan.
And I think the buck stops with him. So anyway, let's wait how he will rescue the country from this crisis.
Marites, Dr. Leon actually talked about how politics was getting in the way of getting the facts out, right? Well, in your sense, you mentioned how do we cross party lines? How do we get the best experts in so that we as a nation can move forward and take the appropriate measures? Do you see this? Is this possible with this administration?
Yeah. Maria, the virus does not recognize political colors eh. In the playbook ng South Korea and Vietnam and other countries, mainstay doon, number 5, enlist all the public health experts, researchers, epidemiologists, experts in everything. Because this is a health crisis eh. I think more than ever, you need all the medical expertise na kailangan mo at this point in time. That's one thing. And I think more important to me as a physician is the emotional tone of the president on how you address more than the content. Because you know the content, you can only say in about 30 minutes or 1 hour. Eh. The nitty-gritty will be coming from the IATF. And as a physician, I think the attributes of sympathy, empathy, and humility and sense of urgency should be there, and try to motivate the entire nation by accepting certain limitation or mistakes, and then move on from there and let your IATF and other economic managers do the talking in the first in this after the SONA. Napaka-importante sa akin as a physician, maramdaman yung sincerity and sympathy and empathy of the president. At this point,
interesting,
Ayun na,
President
naglalakad na si
Duterte.
President
Yeah.
Duterte, no? So,
He's landed from the
ikaw,
chopper.
Doc Tony, how's the president? I mean, you've met him a couple of times, I assume. So, how is he physically? Ano ba? How is he?
very limited yung time ko na makita yung presidente. And the president is 75, and of course he has announced yung mga medical updates niya. And of course, as you age with time, of course, your immunity and all of this particular physical status mo nagdi-dwindle. So dapat, ang tingin ko right now, baka dapat mas ang presidente suportahan by a lot of people eh. If I remember right, about 3 months ago, the Singaporean Prime Minister spoke about, number 1, the Congress will actually provide the budget, but so for the preventive measures like detection, isolation, but they enlisted actually the private sector to talk about the social amelioration funds. And this is a time that the tycoons and perhaps the other billionaires can add up to the plate more than ever. So kung meron ka medical aspects, medical experts, I think the business sector should jump in din. Ang laking problema, there are many tycoons with medical institutions like MVP and I think the Ayalas. Hindi kakayanin eh. Kung puno na yung mga hospitals, they have to get the support then of the other tycoons involved in the medical business right now. Yun ang nakikita ko sa ngayon.
We're
Okay, so
seeing President
Duterte
Duterte at the podium. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, so let's watch this.
Makapangyarihang Allah,
Makapangyarihang Ama,
Makapangyarihang Ama,
Makapangyarihang Ama,
may gawad ng langit at lupa, bagamat kayo ang kataas-taas ng hari, kayo naman ang aming Diyos, na lubusang mahabagin, at ang inyong kapaitan ay walang mali.
buong pagpapakumbaba kaming lumalapit at humihingi ng inyong kapatawaran sa aming mga pagkakasala sa isa't isa, sa aming pagwawalang bahala, sa kalikasan at sa iba pa ninyong mga nilikha.
Hilumin ninyo kami, ang aming mga karagatan at mga kagubatan, marapatin ng muling maging daliwan ng inyong mga biyaya.
sapagkat kayo ay patuloy na namamayani sa lahat, maging sa salot na aming kinatatakutan.
Tulungan ninyo kami na mahanap ang lunas sa laganap ng pagdurusa. Mangusap sa bawat puso namin, muling ipadama sa amin ang inyong pag-aadya.
Patatagin ninyo ang mga kumakalinga sa mga may sakit, ang mga patuloy na nangangailangan sa amin, gantipalaan at pagpalain ang mga tumutulong sa nangangailangan, nang sila ay patuloy na tumatalima sa inyong pahiwatig. Itinatalaga namin sa inyong patnubay ang aming Pangulo,
mga namumuno sa pamahalaan at pribadong sektor.
Pagbuklo rin kami sa pagharap sa mga hamong darating.
Nang may pag-asa at katatagan ng pananampalataya.
Sa dulot ninyong laya at tagumpay.
sapagkat kayo ang aming dakila at katangahan Panginoon, at ang inyong kaharian ay walang hanggan. Ipinagkatiwala sa inyo ang aming bayan, sa inyong pagmamahal, hiling ang aming kaligtasan. Siya naman.
So as you can see, there's a lot of emphasis on
the singing of the national anthem.
here. Let's listen to the national anthem now.
Sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuwing ka nang magiting, sa mandulubling, dito pasisigit, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit bukbok. May dilagang tula at awit sa pagtayaw minamahal, ang kisat ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na nagbinuhin. Ang bituin at araw yung kalan, pagmali magdidilim, lupa na ating pagkakabuhay namin sa piling mo. Ang dilaya ng pagpapalapit, ang nalay ng ayon sa'yo.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of Congress, the President of the Republic of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte.
Kindly. Senate President Vicente Soto III and the honorable members of the Senate, House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano and the honorable members of the House of Representatives, Vice President Maria Leonor Robredo, former Presidents Joseph Ejercito Estrada and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, Chief Justice Diosdado Peralta and the Justices of the Supreme Court, His Excellency Munter Mahfoud Salim Almantre, and the esteemed members of the Diplomatic Corps, Executive Secretary Salvador Mindaldia, and the members of the Cabinet, mga mahal kong kababayan. We live in a troubled time. A dream of prosperity for our country was suddenly snuffed by a pandemic virulent virus. No nation was spared. Neither rich nor poor were exempt from the onslaught of this deadly disease. But let us not despair. The vaccine is around the corner. Sooner and not later, the virus that gobbled up thousands of lives will itself be laid to rest. In the meantime, let us express the nation's gratitude to those who courageously and willingly put their lives on the line to serve the people and country. We share the griefs of their families, and no amount of tears can compensate their great losses. My countrymen, it is sad that while government focuses its attention resources to battle the coronavirus, there are those who take advantage of a preoccupied government. One of them is Senator Frank Dillon. In an interview, he arrogantly mentioned, among others, that oligarchs need not be rich. Then he linked the anti-dynasty system with oligarchy, and the topic was my daughter and son. This happened after the Committee of Franchise voted 70-11 to deny the grant of franchise to ABS-CBN. Obviously, he was defending the Lopezes, that they are not oligarchs. Great wealth enable economic elites and corporations to influence public policy to their advantage. Media is a powerful tool in the hands of oligarchs like the Lopezes, who use their media outlets in their battles with political figures. I am a casualty of the Lopezes during the 2016 election. The dealers and purveyors of illegal drugs, hiding in the shadow of COVID-19, have stepped up their activities. The amount of shabu valued at millions of pesos seized during police operations speak volumes of the enormity and the weight of the problem that we bear. The corrupt, the grafters, and the influence peddlers also take advantage of their fear and confusion that coronavirus generates the financial and material assistance of government to the unemployed, the sick, and the destitute, running into billions of pesos, are not spared from corruption and ineptitude. Even the donations for well-meaning private persons are schemed before reaching their intended beneficiaries. It is like snatching food from the mouths of the babes. The profiteers, overpricers, and the corrupt felons must be laughing while they stash their dirty monies, but not for long. They cannot outrun the long arm of the law. In these regards, the words of former President Ramon Magsaysay ring fresh and relevant today as the day they were said decades ago. He said, "We need men of integrity and faith like Rizal and Del Pilar, men of action like Bonifacio, men of inflexible patriotism like Mabini. We need their zeal, their self-reliance, and their capacity to work, their devotion to service, and their ability to lose themselves in the common cause of building a nation. If we allow greed and self-interest and ambition to rule us, then, as stated by one prominent physician, we will be left with nothing better than the lesser evil instead of the greater good. In my inaugural address 4 years ago, I said that no leader can succeed at anything of national importance without significance unless he has the cooperation and support of the people he is tasked to lead and sworn to serve. The efforts and resources which we poured out produced the momentum needed to bring our country closer to our goals. Suffice it to say, we made significant strides over time. Over 4.3 million poor families benefited from the Pantawid Pamilya. Over 92.2 million beneficiaries received subsidies under the Unconditional Cash Transfer Program. We also made available tertiary education and universal health care. Public utility drivers were given assistance to the Pantawid Pasada program. There are complaints that some drivers did not receive any assistance at all. I have directed the SWD and DILG to look into this. I welcome the passage of the law postponing the barangay and sangguniang kabataan elections. The postponement saved much needed government funds and ensured the implementation of projects under the current barangay officials. In the hindsight, it also saved us from holding the polls while we dealt and continue to deal with the pandemic. The Malasakit Centers Act has proven to be a great help to our less fortunate citizens needing medical services through one-stop platform in government hospitals. We commend the initiative and work of Senator Bongo in this regard, as well as other significant pieces of legislation as of today. There are 75 Malasakit centers serving Filipinos all over the country. These centers will be of great help in ensuring that our people remain healthy and resilient during these challenging times. The Salary and Standardization Law of 2019 increases the salaries of civilian government workers. I hope that this law will inspire our government workers to perform better and encourage young, brilliant citizens to join public service. I appreciate the law of establishing the National Academy of Sports. We can now give our deserving student athletes the training and the support they need to excel in their chosen field of endeavors. With the commitment of key members of Congress, the Executive Department, the Fiscal, or the Philippine Sports Commission, and the Philippine Olympic Committee, we're bound together with one vision to host the 30th Southeast Asian Games. Our athletes prevailed. More than that, we fostered pride, patriotism, genuine sportsmanship, and camaraderie in our South Asian brothers and sisters. Indeed, we won as one. To our business community and the general public, we assure you that the landmark ease of doing business and efficient government service delivery act has been gaining momentum we are closer to eliminating over-regulation in government services. Frontline processes, including consular services, processing of building and business permits, and the services of overseas Filipinos and seafarers were streamlined. Passports and driver's license validity were lessened to ease the burden of the public. We received a BBB plus credit rating despite ASEAN credit rating downgrades and negative outlook revisions worldwide. The Japan Credit Rating Agency upgraded us from BBB plus to A minus last month. Meanwhile, Moody's has affirmed and maintained the country's ratings at BB2, BAA2 rather. To understand, because with the light I have mine eyesight is not as good as new. Our fiscal position is strong, our economic fiscal management prudent, and our banking system robust. We are in a better position to weather the crisis caused by COVID-19 global pandemic. We have accomplished significant infrastructure projects under the Build program. I will not dwell lengthily on the nitty-gritty of our infrastructure accomplishments. Now, lest I bore you. Instead, we will release a comprehensive written report of our collective milestones and the details of accomplishments that remind us that perseverance, patience, determination will help us move forward even in the most difficult times. We issued last year the Executive Order number 100, establishing the Diversity and Inclusion Program as national program of the government. We want to end discrimination of persons on the basis of age, disability, ethnicities, sexual orientation, and gender identity and expression, and other character traits. My administration always believed that freedom from illegal drugs, terrorism, corruption, and criminality is itself a human right violation. Part of our efforts to uphold human rights is protection of the rights of children and the right against discrimination. Early last year, I signed Executive Order number 92, creating the National Council Against Child Labor. Government efforts to protect the rights of children will be amplified to prevent, reduce, and eliminate any form of child labor. Our achievements along this line will have been extolled by an overwhelming number of fellow member states in the UN Human Rights Council during its recently held 44th session last June. Rest assured that we will not dodge our obligation to fight for human rights. My countrymen, there are lessons to be learned from the coronavirus pandemic. It jolted us to realize that gains made after spending so much planning, effort, cost, and time could diminish considerably and quickly for reasons beyond one's anticipation. That it is much easier to destroy than build, that in a crisis of national proportion that affects every aspect of human life, government needs to have the support and cooperation of the people if it is to succeed in battling the cause of that crisis. That there are people who ask for compassion but show none themselves. That life, after all, is fickle like the weather. The gains we achieved for the first 3.5 years were put to a test when the pandemic suddenly struck the global community. While I am aware that the road towards a comfortable life would all be far easy if the pandemic had not occurred, and around the rest of the world we suffered. The global scale and socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been unprecedented. Yet, in the throes of its global health emergency, we have been able to withstand the headwinds generated by this coronavirus. In this regard, I would like to express my gratitude to all those who made possible the steady supply of food, water, basic utilities of our households. And the provisions of basic social services and financial assistance to our people. Our profound gratitude goes to everyone who helped keep our country's food supply chain running. The valiant soldiers, policemen, and security guards who kept peace and order in our community. The dedicated personnel who kept our essential establishment operational. You showed us kindness and selflessness. You gave us strength. You risked your own lives to serve the greater good in keeping the Filipino spirit of bayanihan. I also thank the men and women of the Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases and the National Task Force Against COVID-19 for all the countless hours it spent to keep the pandemic in check and for all the efforts it made to ensure the safety of our people. Let me also recognize the efforts of the local government units that step up and initiated their own response measures to contain effects of COVID-19 and its impact to their constituents have been impact to its constituents. The shadow says it's a period there. I know exactly the difficulties you are undergoing. I pray that the officials of each LGU in our country, from the barangay to the autonomous regions, would set aside partisan politics and selfish interests to do what is right and good for all. Likewise, I likewise issued Executive Order Number 104, which imposed ceilings on retail prices of at least 133 drugs and medicines and directed a continuous review of the retail prices of others. This proved to be providential now that we are facing a pandemic. To everyone who helped us in this time of great need, maraming salamat po. Let me say that the strength of a nation rests in the hands of the people acting as one with government. In the pursuit of common goals and objectives, when the pandemic struck, I decided to prioritize life over other considerations according to experts. The intervention that the government had put in place prevented as much as 1.3 to 3.5 million infections. To me, even if the numbers were much lower, it would still be and would have been worth the sacrifice we made. Buhay muna bago lahat. We initially encountered difficulties ramping up our testing capacity. We now have 93 accredited testing laboratories nationwide, and we are aiming to conduct 1.4 million tests by end of July and ensure a quick turnaround time of 48 to 72 hours. Under the Social Amelioration Program, we allotted 2.5 billion or to 2.5 billion for poor and low-income households who were affected during this pandemic, who thrive on a no work, no pay arrangement. Admittedly, our implementation of the Social Amelioration Program was not perfect, and some opportunists turned crisis into opportunity. We will catch up with you sooner than you think. We came up with the COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program, extended financial assistance to over 650,000 affected individuals in the formal sector, 110 OFWs abroad, and almost 83,000 repatriated OFWs were also provided temporary wage employment to displace marginal workers through the TUPAD project. Our indigent senior citizens were also provided with a stipend for the rest of the semester of the year current year. This health emergency stretched government's resources to its limits. In response to the Office of the President, worked closely with Congress for the quick passage of the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. May I again reiterate my thanks to you, the men and women of Congress, for the effort you invested in passing that law. I hope that they can get some or the same treatment of clarity, purpose, and the fastness to support the passage of the Bayanihan Recover to Act as One, which is supplement funds for recovery and response against the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. We must facilitate the country's economic recovery. I call on Congress to fast-track the passage of the proposed measure, such as the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives Enterprises or CREATE Act. This immediately cuts the corporate income levy from the current 30 to 25% and give government flexibility to grant a combination of fiscal and non-fiscal incentives, among others. The financial institution strategic transfer or First Act will set up mechanisms allowing banks and other financial institutions to dispose of and transfer non-performing assets and loans to asset management companies similar to the special purpose vehicles. Our economic managers have seen infrastructure investment as an effective tool to help spur high growth, attract investments, create jobs, and achieve financial inclusion for all Filipinos. The DBP has resumed the construction of the North Luzon Expressway Harbor Link, the NLEX SLEX connector, the Cavite-Laguna Expressway, the Metro Manila Skyway Stage 3, the R1 Bridge Project, the Tarlac-Pangasinan-La Union Expressway Project, and the Subic Freeport Expressway Project, to name a few. To realize the maximum benefit from the country's investments, the infrastructure projects under the Build program, which are labor and capital intensive, are not mere springboard for the country's swift recovery pandemic. They are economic benefits to be distributed to all corners of the country and push sustainable stability in the urban centers, particularly Manila. The TESTA launched online mode of livelihood and skills training. There are 71 free online training to help upskill trainees for the right opportunities. I asked TESDA to come up with special training programs to retool our OFWs so they can find employment opportunities here and at home. I am also calling on the CHED for scholarship programs for the qualified dependents of our OFW. I direct the Department of Agriculture and DTI to come up with the agribusiness and entrepreneurship projects to help displaced OFWs rebuild their livelihood. Further, I ask the Land Bank and other government financial institutions to continue providing low interest loans to our OFW. Sa mga kababayan ko na naghihirap sa ibang bansa, nandito na ang inyong gobyerno para matulungan kayo at inyong mga pamilya, lalo na sa panahong ito. The government will intensify its efforts to help businesses, especially micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, by providing responsive government assistance and services capitalization and business operation support as we adapt to the next normal. Nananawagan po ako sa ating mga lessors. Nananawagan po ako sa ating mga lessors. Malasakit at bayanihan po ang sana ang pairalin natin ngayon. This is not the time to drive away leases. During normal times, they were the primary source of your income stream. Now it's time to be fair and compassionate. Come up with an amenable arrangement with your tenants. Huwag po natin silang pagtabuyan, tanggalin ang tubig, kuryente at bubong. Commercial establishments are requested to give grace periods to allow deferment of payments, especially for MSMEs that were forced to close down during the quarantine period. Let us help them recover. We pump prime the recovery and rehabilitation of the MSMEs. The DTI to the Small Business Corporation set up the Philippine 1 billion COVID assistance to restart enterprises or CARES program to provide zero interest loans for MSMEs affected by the pandemic as of July 10, 2020. Over 2,600 loans applications worth more than 182.5 million have been approved. We are optimistic that this initiative will help our MSMEs stabilize and recover from their losses. I also join the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the banks operating in the country to provide regulatory relief for our MSMEs and allow loan payment extension without incurring penalties and charges. We need your help to prevent the collapse of companies saddled with accumulated amortization and payables caused by closure of their businesses at the height of the strict quarantine periods. As we embark on this effort towards inclusive recovery, we should acknowledge that all forms of government support will go to naught if the new MSMEs do not thrive because of lack of consumer support. Ito ang panahon para suportahan natin ang ating mga kababayan na nagdinegosyo at gumawa ng mga produktong sariling atin. In the same manner, in tourism and recreation industries, which are among the hardest hit by the pandemic, count on our full support while we slowly try to put the fun back in your local travels. The national government agencies and LGUs must harmonize their policies to boost tourism, ensuring everyone's well-being. We enjoin our people to help boost the economy by traveling locally. Local na lang. Once the necessary system are in place. The DOST offers its enterprise technology upgrading program to enable businesses to access training that will help them transition to online and contactless operation. Now more than ever, we need to protect our consumers. I direct the Department of Trade and Industry to ensure the empowerment of Filipinos on consumer rights and coordinate strategies between public and private organizations in building a fair, safe, resilient, and sustainable economy. There are welcome developments for commerce and industry, but major economic activities take place in borderless environment with the meager regulatory controls. They expose consumers to various risks related to security, data, privacy, and misrepresentation. We must patrol the country's cyberspace and enforce online consumer and data protection and privacy laws. We must run after online scammers and those undermining the people's trust on the online transactions. We must continue to protect Filipinos in the normal and remind the world that we are responsible stewards of data. I am committed to protect both physical and digital lives of our law-abiding countrymen. The national government shall lead the way in our transition to online systems. I reiterate my call for all government instrumentalities to implement systems that shall make physical queuing a thing of the past. Panahon na para mawala na ang pila para mapagsilbihan ang gobyerno ng walang kahirapan para sa tao. The DILG, DBM, and the ARTA, along with all agencies and instrumentalities of government, are hereby directed to make full possible services available online. We need to adjust and adapt a paperless type of business and work performance. We need e-governance. E-governance are people with the services they need and the comfort of their homes in the work or workplaces. It will enable us bureaucracy to better transition into the new normal and cut red and minimize red tape. Until the COVID-19 vaccine is available, I will not allow the traditional face-to-face teaching or learning unless the risk of exposure to the sickness are eliminated. I cannot and will not put to rest the health and lives of our students and teachers. About 2 weeks ago, I seem to have said that I would allow the face-to-face classes to resume. But we were talking actually of January, because my thinking is that by September, we would have the vaccine. How to get it from the producers or from other governments is really something which we have to deal with, because everyone, it's a global need, and everyone will go for it. But let me just mention it in passing that about 4 days ago, I made a plea to President Xi Jinping that if they have the vaccine, can they allow us to be one of the first, or if it's needed, if you have to buy it, that we will be granted credit so that we can normalize as fast as possible. Life that is lost forever. Courses that are not substantial can be supplemented. Education that is delayed can be recovered. We must implement online learning, modular learning, and TV and radio-based broadcasts, which students coming from different backgrounds can avail. DepEd will provide the printed modules for those who cannot afford online learning. In support of the learning continuity program through blended learning, we plan to increase the number of schools with ICT equipment in the coming months. The DepEd and the DITC are building up the public education network or PEN that will connect all public schools and DepEd offices nationwide. We will prioritize the connection of all last mile schools and those with no electricity supply can have it via satellite and energized via solar panels. By 2022, before I step down, the pen shall be realized. I'm referring to the program. I will do it. TV frequencies reverted back to government for whatever cause or reason shall not be used exclusively to the exclusion of other persons or other dummies to cope up with the demand of the next normal. This will be used to provide uninterrupted quality education to our children and our shift to e-learning. I am directing Secretary Guevara, Secretary De La Peña, and Secretary Onasan in collaboration with Secretary Briones and Secretary Abisado, together with Secretary Dominguez, to come up with an integrated program and implementation mechanism to ensure that these TV frequencies are fully utilized by government through the facilities of the PTV4 for the utmost benefit of the Filipino people. Let me just allow me to segue a little bit. For the remaining 2 years of my term, all that is good that belongs to government, whether it be the airwaves, whether it be the lines, or whatever that is good for the people, will belong to the government, and it should be government who should be given the first option to utilize them. Ang sobra kanila. I call on our communication companies to improve their services lest we be forced to take drastic steps to address the less than deal service that the public is getting from you. Alam mo, sisingit na lang ako dito. I am sometimes you are government pictured to be weak and incompetent because we cannot really force our mandate. Alam mo itong nagbibigay ng mga public services, you better improve. Huwag naman ninyo kaming pahintayin 10 taon bago kami makakamit ng mga services that the other countries are enjoying. If it's just a question of added capitalization or the infusion of money, go and look for it. Maghanap kayo, because if you are not ready to improve, I might just as well close all of you and we revert back to the line telephone. At kukunin ko yan, i-expropriate ko sa gobyerno. Alam mo itong, I'll be straight, smart, pati itong globe, ilang taon na ito. At ang sagot palagi sa akin, the party cannot be reached. Nasaan pala pumunta yung yawa na yun? Kung ganun lang naman ibigay niyo sa amin, we are a republic, a sovereign country. Bear that in mind, because the patience of the Filipino people is reaching its limit. At I will be the one to articulate the anger of the Filipino people. And you might not want what I intend to do with you. Kindly improve the services before December. I want to call Jesus Christ to Bethlehem. Better have that line cleared. Alam, sa totoo ng Adre na po, ano ako sa inyo. I have been a citizen of this country and parang nilalaro lang ninyong, kayong may pera. Puta. May pera kayo? Negosyo kayo. Wala kayong pera, putang, umalis kayo dito. You give us half deals, half cooked transactions, lousy service. Tapos ang tao nagbabayad. Tell us now if you cannot really improve on it, because I will work by December. I have 2 years. The next 2 years will be spent improving the telecommunications of this country. Without you, I will find a way. I will talk to Congress and find a way how to do it. Last year, I said that distributing economic business activities is imperative to our country's sustained and equitable growth. Today, I reiterate that statement. I issued Administrative Order Number 18, directing concerned agencies to strengthen the development of special economic zones in areas outside Metro Manila. I also issued Executive Order Number the same, 114, to institutionalize the Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa program. This consolidates and refocuses existing economic and social welfare programs, activities, and projects toward the countryside. It is also an international agency council headed by Executive Secretary Salvador Medaldia, which will create a framework for the effective implementation of the project. Kung hindi ninyo ako naiintindihan, sinabasa ko, mas lalo ako. In 2021, we aim to increase access to healthcare services by continuously hiring and deploying more than 20,000 health professionals. This will augment health workforce in LGUs, particularly in isolated and disadvantaged areas. We will implement projects to establish and improve barangay health stations, rural health units, and other healthcare facilities. And we will need to address internal security. We are pursuing the whole of the nation approach to bring peace and order, development in the countryside. We need to provide intervention and implement the barangay development program. This will provide cleared and threatened communities. This refers to a program where the armed forces would play a vital role in the one nation approach. This is what it's meant by this. And that every agency of the government, including the armed forces of the Philippines, should participate. And I am aware of the skirmishes and the assassination of our soldiers. And I said, correct this so that we can proceed with the barangay implementation as fast as possible. We have made significant strides in the past 4 years, but we need the support of local government leaders. We need your help to implement the barangay development program. Certain sectors expressed concern when I declared martial law in Mindanao and its extension 3 times. But 2019 ended without my office requesting any further extension. Martial law in Mindanao ended without abuses by the civilian sector, by the police, by the military. And ended because this time I know that they know how to love the country. I thank Congress for the support to these administration programs. Congress has been very productive, but much more remains to be done. You know, actually, my speech, if we followed it carefully, it's all a plea to Congress to do this, to do that, to make a law or craft a whatever. And this one, I strongly urge Congress to pass a law establishing the Department of Overseas Filipinos, solely on addressing the concerns of Filipinos abroad and their families. I reiterate this swift passage before this. Kawawa kasi itong ating mga overseas. If it's only an office there in the Labor Department, they are overworked or for whatever reason, their needs, their pleas are not really attended to with dispatch and with care. OFW, pati itong ano ngayon, ito yung sinabi ko kanina, I will go for it. We will need it to help them. I reiterate the swift passage of a law reviving the death penalty by lethal injection for crimes specified under the Comprehensive Dangerous Act of 2002 I did not hear so much clapping, so I presume that they are not interested. Wala kang... Someday I'll tell you the story of what happened to the Philippines. Hindi ngayon. But when sabihin ko sa inyo ang totoo, bakit nagaganito yung droga ng Pilipinas? Why the drug syndicates continue to operate just like the countries of Colombia, Mexico, and it is being played inside the national penitentiaries. Para tayong talagang binababoy tayo. Sabihin ko sa inyo. But this is not a time for storytelling. Suna kasi ito. So dito na. This law will not only help us deter criminality, but also save our children from the dangers posed by the illegal and dangerous drugs. May I be allowed with the indulgence of the body? Itong bakit talaga ako galit sa droga. Let us make this a semi-formal speech. Alam mo kasi, 5 pamilya members o 6 or 7, pagka bumagsak yung tatay to drugs, the family crumbles. There's no more home to. Droga, and if he's receiving his salary, nagtatrabaho sa pantalan, 300 a day. Tapos ang shabu is sold at 2. He has about 100 to bring home. Kaya pag gano'n, nag-aaway-aaway na. Ang mga bata hindi nakapag-aral. Ang iba, ligaw na mga babae into early prostitution. Kung ano-ano nangyari. Hindi lang alam nitong mga na this is happening all over the country every day. And what is really very tragic is this. When the family starts to crumble, there's no more family home. And invariably, the wife would look for another husband would look for a job, usually, easily, doon sa abroad. At yung asawa, aalis, yung lalaki na sa droga, yung mga anak iniiwan sa kapitbahay, sa kapatid. And the ferocity of the loss of the Filipino family home has been destroyed. Kaya kung anong mangyari nito, the wife works in the Middle East. I am not zeroing on any particular country, mind you. But alam natin, there are tribes in the Middle East which would allow rape as part of the territory of being a house help. Kasama yan. Kasama talaga yan. So yan ang mahirap dyan. You have a wife there being crucified, being used, magpadala ng pera, tapos ang mga anak, asan nasa Cebu na rin. Kasi these are the guys that the Cebu people would really, stick by them until it crumbles. the resistance. And then you have plenty of this all over the country. Nila alam. Yung sinasabi nila ng misery sa itong human rights, plus 10 yan. Not to count the victims of crimes perpetrated by people addicted to book. That is the reason why I'm so vicious in my galit talaga ako. See? Nilalaroan tayo. Well, I don't know. Any other president might, pero ako ayaw kong lalaroan ng Pilipino. Do not do it in my country because I will really kill you. That is a commitment. Owning safe, decent, and affordable housing is every Filipino's dream. But the housing market remains inaccessible to most of our countrymen. I renew my call for Congress to pass the National Housing Development Bill and the Rental Housing Subsidy Bill. These will enable all Filipinos, regardless of social status, to live in decent homes where their families can lead meaningful lives. I also call on Congress to amend Republic Act number 10912 for the Continuing Professional Development Act of 2016. In this time of great pandemic and forthcoming reconstruction, requiring professionals to undergo seminars is burdensome and not realistic. This must end. Ito pang isa. May mga profession. Singit ko na lang lahat to tell this is to inform the nation. May mga profession na they would require, I think it's the nicest, they would require them to come to Manila to retrain and for another round of expenses. Itong mga seminar na ito, dapat mahinto. I don't know in other provinces, but during my time, yung sa barangay expeditions ng mga opisyal, hininto ko rin yan. And which reminds me, I will act on this also due time. We hail our health professionals as heroes. Now is the time to pass the Advanced Nursing Education Act and the law instituting the Medical Reserve Corps. COVID-19 will not only be the last pandemic. We need to create National Disease Prevention Management Authority to better respond to future outbreaks. We count on Congress to full support. You can just let it remain for a while in the Department of Health kung wala pang pera, but you have to expand the services. It would also entail a little bit of money, but not really as much as expensive when you set up a department. In the long term, we are looking into the creation of the National Disease Prevention and Management Authority to better prepare for the pandemics, protect lives, and allow development to proceed even in the worst of times. We are counting on the full support of Congress for this critical, important endeavor. I don't know, but I leave it to Congress to really. It's another department. There seems that it could be a multi-layer, redundant thing, between the health and the proposed department. I call on Congress to prioritize the passage of a law for the unified system of separation, retirement, and pension, and of the military and uniformed personnel without, however, diminishing the benefits that our uniformed personnel are entitled to under existing laws. There is a need to adjust the pension system, which will be applicable only to the newly hired uniformed personnel, so as not to cause a ballooning effect against the budget of the military in the years to come, and yet maintain the pension benefits those already in service under the present law. This issue needs a solution now. Umpisahan natin ngayon para hindi na maging problema sa sunod na mga taon. I want to, well, one of the, this is not politicking, I am not running, I cannot run anymore. Yung dinoble ko yung sweldo ng police pati army, it was really a clarion call para for them also to have a decent life and that they're able to get the things which ordinarily cannot be reached by any government employee. Ang akin doon is yung corruption. That maybe it might be a vain attempt, but maybe dagdagan ng sweldo para it would be a hedge against corruption. We must also modernize the Bureau of Fire Protection and the Bureau of Immigration with urgency. Alam mo, sa Davao, and if you go there, I can show you. One of the serviceable trucks, fire trucks that we have in the city of Davao. Of course, ang city meron ng sarili, aside from the Bureau of Fire, which is really national. Meron yung Bureau of Fire, would you believe it, serviceable still. Ang pangalan ng truck is Studebaker. Ang katawan, ang talagang matatag ang katawan. Kaya ang makina isuso. Pero okay pa rin. It can put out. But totoo. This is how this Bureau of Fire issue medyo na overlook natin ng matagal. I emphasize the creation of the Department of Disaster Resilience and our people's safety, which cannot be delegated to any council or commission. Equally important is the establishment of evacuation center in every city, province, municipality throughout the country. We must act before another major disaster shakes into action. Problem is disaster and even a fire. This cannot be made a study for projection when the earthquake would suddenly come and make a big crack there. Hindi natin alam talaga. Ang ibig kong sabihin, this will require more than just one brainwork kung paano talaga itong how to prevent or avoid disaster. It would be By the way, just before starting, I was tempted to say it. Pero baka magtindigan kayo. It will be all right for me if Bongo will just stay. Wala akong problema. Sabi ko na this piece of speech of mine would be one of the longest sonas that I will deliver. Nakita ko yung page pagbigay sa akin. Yung ibang input akin. Pati yung iba lahat. Ang nangyari po, binalik ko sa kanila. Make it short. Pagbalik sa akin, mas makapal na. Nandyan na ngayon. Ito na ngayon. The responsible extraction and equitable distribution of natural resources remain among my non-negotiables. I reiterate the need for the passage of the National Land Use Act, which has been pending for decades. Pakisilip lang ho ninyo yan. For the rest of my term, I hope to see concerted efforts in protecting the environment. The rehabilitation of Boracay Island showcased our resolve to safeguard the environment. Boracay is doing well because of its scenery. If it's only a coconut and a black sand, white sand and water, wala yan. Pero you add the visitors there, then it becomes a very tempting destination. We have seen remarkable emergence of the island back to its former glory. I want this sustained. I ask Congress to enact a law creating, importante ito, the Boracay Island Authority or BIDA. We need it. I cannot stress enough the importance of agriculture. The growth of our economy depends on a robust agricultural sector. We must utilize the coconut levy for the welfare of our coconut farmers and the development of our coconut industry. I urge everybody, both of the executive department pati ito, that ito yung pera na nakuha doon sa sequester. And itong perang malaking ito, gagamitin ito for the welfare of the farmers. The problem is, we can no longer trace who are the farmers of yesterday. Marcos is a distant star. We do not know. Ako alam ko because we had a little piece also that was covered by the land reform. Hindi na natin malaman kung sino ang may-ari. So I think Congress should look again and try to sort out how best the money can be utilized. I will not make any suggestion, but I leave it to Congress to decide what to do with it. I once again urge both houses of Congress to pass a version of the bill establishing the Coconut Farmers Trust Fund. Tulungan natin ang ating mga magsasaka pagka hindi mawawala yung pera, bilyon yan. Diyos ko po. Well, anyway, we have learned so many lessons along the way. I am also requesting Congress to pass the Rural, Agricultural, and Fisheries Development Financing System Act. We aim to provide adequate, accessible, and affordable food for every Filipino through the Plant program. After the build, I think this is easier to achieve. A few good men, few good regional directors, DAR, and dedicated workers down below could make this thing a success. Mas madali ito kaysa build. Ito plant lang eh. It is more of how you try to convince the farmers to cooperate government for their benefit. This 66 billion agricultural stimulus package will help the agricultural and fisheries sector recover. I hope so. We need to build trust and confidence in online transactions, stronger protection on online consumers, and enabling measures for online business needed through the enactment of an Internet Transaction Act. This is very good. I thus direct the Department of Trade and Industry and other relevant agencies to work on it closely with Congress, ensuring that the provisions of the proposed bill are responsive to the needs of the consumers while promoting the growth of e-commerce in the country. If you are tired of clapping, you just say so I can make a shortcut. Pabilisan lang yan. On the path of better governance, we travel with other partners, both old and new, have helped bolstering the antiquated public health system for bringing home our laid of Filipinos overseas, for filling in supply gaps for crucial medical supplies and equipment and staple food. For these and many more, the Philippines thanks all friendly nations. We will never forget your kindness and your timely support. Within ASEAN and beyond the Philippines, we will continue to work with partners to address global perils and ramp up cooperation to secure for our peoples greater peace, progress, and prosperity. The Filipino nation claims its rightful place in a community of sovereign states. Thus, we will continue to pursue an independent foreign policy. Let me be very clear about this. May I cut my prepared speech? Alam mo, I read a little over 3 weeks or last month na the Americans intends to go back to Subic. I'll just put on record my thoughts. I have nothing against America. I have nothing against China. But if you put bases here, you double the spectacle of a most destructive thing. Just like Manila during the Second World War, during the retaking of this city, one of the most devastated cities in the world. Kaya maglagay-lagay ka ng base at this time. This will ensure if war breaks out, because there would be atomic arsenals brought in. This will ensure the extinction of the Filipino race. We work without fail to protect our rights in the South China Sea, neither beholden nor a pawn to anyone. We broaden the boundaries of Philippine diplomacy. We build productive ties with everyone willing to engage us on the basis of equality and mutual respect. And we redefined our relationships with our most important partners, placing the country in a far better position to advance our interests in an evolving regional order and emerging global problems. Now, plenty of critics, both sides, claim about nothing has been done to retake forcefully or physically the South China Sea. Alam mo, unless we are prepared to go to war, I would suggest that you better just call off and treat this, I said, with the diplomatic endeavors. China is claiming it. We are claiming it. China has the arms. We do not have it. So, it's simple as that. They are in possession of the property. You remember property, your lawyer, property rights. They are, it has nothing to do with the Philippine laws on property. But it's akin to, they are in possession. So what can we do? We have to go to war. And I cannot afford it. Maybe some other president can, but I cannot. Inutil ako dyan, sabihin ko sa inyo. And I'm willing to admit it. Talagang inutil ako dyan. Walang magawa. I cannot. The moment I send my Marines there at the coastal shores of Palawan, tinamaan ng cruise missile lahat yan. Hindi pa nga set sail yan eh. Sabog na. Let me see again that the victory in a global battle against COVID-19 would take longer than we expect. Everyone's cooperation is needed. I know that you have, the Filipino people, have sacrificed a lot, but we have no other choice but to work together and to do even more. I must admit that our actions have been far from perfect. Totoo yan. I admit it. And there could be improvements here and there. But all of us in government, including myself, assure you that we will not stop until we get things right and better for you. I know that many of you are worried not only about health and safety, but also about our ability to move around and ride public transportation. The depletion of your savings due to the rising cost of goods and the loss of your incomes due to uncertainties in your jobs and livelihood, I assure you that your government will address squarely these problems and challenges to overcome them and proceed to a new normal. Marami ho talagang mawawalaan ng those for a middle income. They buy a car on installment basis. You cannot keep up with the amortization. You lose it. You lose the car. And you are forced to ride on public utilities. Concomitantly, didiretso rin itong mga kriminal na rarami at crimes will increase. But let me assure you, for as long as I am president, there can never be a runaway crime in any of our cities. Hindi ako papayag na ganun. I can assure you, we will remain peaceful. Relatively peaceful. Hindi naman very peaceful. Pero kung sabihin mo na kagaya ng hold up dito, hold up, alam naman nila kung anong mangyari. You know what will happen to you. I am addressing myself to the criminals. You commit hold-ups, you commit rape, you commit all sorts of things, and you harm the public, then kaaway mo na ako. Pag bumalik kayo sa dati, kagaya noon, patong-patong na naman ang patay dito. Sigurado, hahanapin ko kayo. Do not ever go back to your old ways. Maghanap na lang kayo ng anong trabaho dyan. Magtiis kayo. To open up the economy to pre-COVID-19 levels at this time is not an option because whatever good it can produce will only be gobbled up or be outweighed by the bad it will generate sometimes. Haste makes waste. The recent upsurge of infection, when you open little windows of resumption of business, is proof of that. I am happy that I have talked to you today. You know, in other places, they opened up too early, too soon. America is one. China, well, fortunately, it was arrested on time. China and the rest, for those who open up, and those who do not follow the protocols of at least the World Health Organization, they are suffering. And they have at least 140 deaths. And America, kukulang sila lahat. No nation on earth was really prepared for COVID. No amount of preparation because that kind of microbes visits about once every 100 years. Wala man yung mga tatay natin. What they suffered was Second World War. But tayo, we are not ready and therefore we will not gamble with the lives and health of the people. Certainly no one would want to end up in the negative side of the equation. Not me, not us. All I ask is that you continue to put your faith in your government and work with us in achieving what is best for the country and our people. Together, let us do, mahirap basahin kasi dito, the most that we can to ensure that this health, safety, and well-being of every Filipino, especially those severely affected, are taken care of. Together, we shall fight this pandemic with the same fervor as our campaign against illegal drugs, criminality, insurgency, and corruption in high places, and entrenched parochial interests. As a government worker, I am addressing each and every Filipino that the government cannot do this without your help. More than ever, we need to reinvigorate the deep-seated Filipino spirit of pakisama and malasakit within each and every one of us. We are being tested as a people and as a nation. Worse times loom ahead. But I do hope that this spirit of solidarity and unity will serve as a drumbeat to which we shall march in unison in our quest for the light at the end of the tunnel. I appeal to each and every Filipino, let us take care of one another. Ito ang panahon para magtulungan, hindi panahon para maglamanan, mamang, dila ko. Hindi maglamang at pagkakaisa. My faith in the Filipino innate patience, resilience, and determination to bounce back is unwavering. Let us share our blessings with those who have little and those who have none. This is the time to bring out the best in us. The woes that weigh heavily on our shoulders may bend our back, but they shall not bend or break our spirit. From the rubbles of adversity, a more resilient and stronger nation, built on bayanihan and pagkakaisa, shall rise. Together, we shall overcome. Before I pardon the time, but it was really the allotted time for my speech. I would just like to give a statement between us sa gobyerno kung hindi tayo nakakaintindihan. You know, Drilon extended, he was defended. I would like to ask Drilon, were you a part of Accra when this contract of Ayala Water was being drafted? And why are you fumigating? Bakit kasi ikaw lang ang galit? Nasabi mo na dynasty. You are a hypocrite. You know that you cannot pass an anti-dynasty law. Ikaw nandyan sa Congress, ikaw ang mauna dito. But you know, to take it against me for protecting my country is something which I really resent. Alam mo, you describe using the dictionary the synonym ng mga oligarchy. Then you proceeded to characterize everyone, every name, and then said that oligarchy is not bad at all because not all oligarchies are bad. True. But ito, to my countrymen, the oligarchy that exists in this country is the oligarchy that existed during the Spanish time. And the Spanish lands and the friar lands and all the benefits that were passed on to the insulares who did not go back to Spain or to the Spaniards and into their... But that was long ago. It has been forgotten. This is the oligarchy that controls the Philippines by what? By taking control of the water and the electricity and power. Yan ang oligarchy mo, Drilon. Wala nang oligarchy dito except that. They have control. Look at how can you now craft a new contract, because I would insist that you pay the billions and billions that you collected. For example, 1997, ilang bilyon na nga wala ni isa. Not even a faucet was built for a water treatment facility. Yan ang mahirap sa, you do not protect the oligarchs here. You are the one, ikaw lang mag-isa. And I suspect that you were also the one or help when you were there in the Accra. We do not even know ang mga abogado sa public documents. Hindi nga alam. Hindi natin alam kung nakagraduate ba o hindi. Wala. Would you think Ayala would get the services of those? Ayala got Accra. Accra did it. Ikaw galing ka doon. Most of you, more successful lawyers sa corporation. You handle big corporate. Yan ang mahirap. O, bangga tayo dito. Hinawakan ninyo eh. Hindi ka pwede kayo. Kita mo, noong nag-increase, walang tubig, pinuputol yung tubig. Ang tao, bumigay kasi hindi pwede yung tayo di maligo. Hindi uminom. Electricity, ayaw mo mag-increase. O ayan, wala ka. Palaging brown out lahat. I'm sorry, but I have to say this to you. I do not like it. It's not the time for it. But since it is the time for the SONA, for people to know and people to really get the facts, then, and the right of the people to be heard. Tayo na naman ang tao magsano. Hinawakan ninyo yung tubig, pati electricity. Yun ang oligarchy. Kaya ako sinabi ko noong kumpanya, corruption is not here. Yung mga customs, maliit yan. It's there upstairs. And I was really unprovidential. Dumating yung panahon na hindi ko hiningi. Then I saw the contract. Nung nakita ko yung contract na, tsaka yung linya na yung choice, yung linya ng it belongs to government. The best of the transmission lines, whatever, government gets it first before anybody else. Thank you. I am through.
On the part of the Senate, the joint session is adjourned.
On the part of the House of Representatives,
That was an anticlimactic
Is adjourned.
ending. A very, very anticlimactic ending. Why don't we get a sense of your reactions? Let's go first. Who should we go to first? Ralph.
Sino nga ba? Si Ma'am Marites mukhang maraming insights. So why don't we go with her?
No, actually, Dr. Lechon and I were chatting during the speech. But first, for me, meron siyang gallery. Yung mga pinapraise niya lagi. I hear some background music, no? Anyway, of course, China, source of vaccine. Who wants, sabi niya, I hope he can stay. So it's unclear whether to stay until after he steps down as president. And then he, of course, so he has his stars, Bongo, China, and of the usual, I mean, the frontliners, yes, those who have served the country. He also has his villains, the oligarchs, the ones whom he thanked earlier, who run our water and electricity utilities. He praised them in the early part of his speech, and then he lashed at them towards the end of his speech. So,
Marites, sorry,
yeah.
can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, what was the thread going through the president's mind as close as you could figure out?
No, first we are
the one on the Manila water, on Senator Drilon, on there seemed to have been a thread that he carried all the way through. Could you maybe the economists could figure?
Yes, I think JC and Ralph can talk about it. But the thing is, in this entire speech of 1 hour 40 minutes or 45 minutes, there was little really about what the government will do to contain the transmission. We were waiting for that, but he said something interesting. He said, we will not stop until we get things right. So which means they've been getting things wrong. So I wanted to know what steps would they take. So yun yung kulang, but the economy, yes, the oligarchs, his favorite. I think just one more point. Populist leaders kasi define their leadership against enemies. So usual drugs. My God, we're in the COVID-19. The world has changed. Nagbago na ang mundo. Yet drugs, death penalty. Anyway, so yun lang. Na-jar ako ng konti kasi I was expecting a roadmap to get us out of this greatest unprecedented public health crisis since World War II, and also, of course, economic crisis. Yet, he addressed tangential issues and the usual. I don't know. So my sense is, baka he's just airing his ideas. So talking head na lang siya. Then bahana na lang yung cabinet niya IATF to do the work. So anyway, back to the oligarchs.
Well,
JC
well,
or
I started covering utilities nung nagsimula yung water crisis. But the history there is that the government was not competent enough to do the water and electricity, kaya nga binigay sa private sector. Now, whether or not that was the
Correct.
right choice, but historically, government had its reasons why kaya nga bakit binigay sa private sector yan. And based on the figures of Manila Water and Maynilad, they were able to greatly reduce what's called as the non-revenue water, meaning yung waste na water, na yung mga nasayang na water because of leakages. It was able to provide coverage. Well, yeah, I mean, siguro services-wise, the government, the private sector was able to provide that. Now, the issue is on cost. Now, was the deal too sweet? At that time, probably hindi naisip yan, or I'm not too sure. Pero yung basa ko based on literature is that government had to find ways to attract the private sector, di ba? Kasi sobrang intense ng problem noon eh.
Correct.
So it's not a black and white situation, but going back again to the whole oligarchs definition, parang ano ba?
Ralph, I think this is a huge distraction from what we are supposed to be talking about. We talk about oligarchs and specific companies. You would expect that we would hear nothing from President Duterte other than the pandemic response. And in fact, this is how they advertised this particular SONA. We were waiting for concrete steps when it comes to the economic rescue packages, but he only got to mention CREATE, which is a bill that proposes tax cuts, which is not really a stimulus package that we need. And he also talked about build, mentioning the projects that have already been completed or on the way of being completed, but many of those actually started from the previous administration. And then it's as if he echoed the economic managers that build is our way to jumpstart the economy, get us out of this economic rut. But as I wrote before, this is not the best strategy, and we should be pouring resources instead on the health crisis, because as I mentioned earlier, it is primordial. It is the thing that we must urgently address. So it's unfortunate that we have been distracted by talk about oligarchs and specific companies. These are not the things we should be hearing about from the president.
Yeah, early on in the speech,
Yeah.
Dr. Leachon.
Dr. Leachon, I wanted to ask.
Oh, go ahead,
President
Right.
Duterte made this claim early in his speech that the vaccine is around the corner, sooner and not later. He also said that well, he said he asked Chinese President Xi Jinping na parang kung magkaka vaccine mauna daw tayo. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for disclosure, I used to work in the pharma industry. I used to be medical director Pfizer for almost 2 decades. That's my past life, and I'm pretty well versed about vaccines. Well, based on the timeline internally and of course in the news, the Pfizer vaccine will come in end of this quarter, perhaps by December. And it's on phase 3, meaning to say if you finish the phase 3, you have to apply at the US FDA for facilitated approval. I'm sure it will get facilitated approval in a month because it is a global need. But the situation here is that the dominant countries, the G8 countries, will of course dominate the market. Ang magiging problema mo nito is based on our timelines in the Philippines. Kung business as usual, 6 months after the US FDA approval, so it will be in July of 2021. But kung stretch to and you have philanthropies like Bill Gates in the States, it can be, facilitated first quarter of next year. Yan ang pinaka-optimistic. So I was thinking, in terms of timeline, from July to December, you have to maximize right now the hammer and dance concept of Thomas Pueyo. Meaning to say, you have to arrest the case, mag-lockdown ka muna ng mga 2 weeks, and then mobilize all your SARS together with a team on the prevention plan, detection plan, isolation plan, quarantine plan, contact tracings plan, then reintegrate that into the economy and transition into the new normal until the vaccine is there. So apparently, parang ang reading ko, hindi well aware ang president as to the real timelines of the vaccine development. And I don't know whether the president has been briefed by the Secretary of Health or any person in the pharma industry na marunong about vaccine development. Ang dali naman yan kung magtatanong lang tayo so that you can pattern your national master plan. And I was envisioning sana the speech of the president to be like this. So the usual three strategic questions. Where are we now? So he would perhaps summarize in 2016 to 2020, at least the 4 years prior to the COVID, and then separate the COVID issues. So pag-usapan niya siguro yung issues, challenges, and achievements niya, 4 years. And then January nag-start kasi yung COVID So COVID to July, ano yung issues mo, right? Ano yung plan mo? And then kung hindi siya effective, apparently hindi effective kasi nandiyan pa rin yung cases. Ang next question mo, where do you want to go from here? So lalagyan ko siya ng short-term timeline na second 100 days up to December, considering yung movement nila right now. And then how do you get there? Doon ko unveil yung new COVID recovery plan ng health together with the economy and focus on this, and then promise that in the next week after this, the IATF will submit to the nation yung detailed report. Ganun ang nasa mind ko. And then put everybody on one page, yung governors, the LGU, the business sector, and the medical community, day to day after the SONA, para after that, all guns blazing na tayo and into the next 100 days. I was thinking on that assumption. And then ang maganda yung start niya sana nandun sa sympathy, empathy, compassion. I was thinking in this time of crisis, para magsasalita ka lang John F. Kennedy or a Martin Luther King Jr. or an Abe Lincoln, and then konting structure, and then finish it off with a nice inspirational quote or a promising one. But anticlimactic, he talked about a few times about Senator Jelon. And then, yun nga, humina ng konti at yung pahuli. Kasi the closing statement should be powerful enough to rally the people eh. Yan ang comment ko in terms of the speech structure.
Well, it sounds like you definitely had a good idea of what structure could have worked, but given the reality of what we listened to, what do you think the takeaway is for our nation?
Okay. Ako, personally, if I were the president there talking about health epidemic, I should have talked to somebody na pwede ma-structure yun eh. I would model the way and then inspire a shared vision to the country. Knowing na wala ka namang excuses for these mistakes, eh, they have to admit that and work on it. And then challenge the process of the last 6 months, and then try to move on. And then enable others to act rather than kaaway mo. You want to get them on your side because this is a time for unity, this is a time for solidarity and for sobriety. And then you want to encourage the heart and motivate people so that at the end of the day, even if you have some, mistakes or some problems, ito mapapalitan ng simpatya. And then all the more that you will inspire people to on your side. I think this should be more an emotional speech rather than a structured, detailed speech, which I don't think the president can naman detail the detailed report of the IATF on the health and the economic recovery. That's the way I would put it kung ako'y natanong dito.
JC, what did you take out of it? Like as a Filipino listening, do we have? You already said you were looking for the COVID and the economy, but what did we get? This is his second to the last State of the Nation address. Where is President Duterte and where is he leading our nation?
Yes, Maria. So invariably, I think the pandemic will define his legacy. If you remember back in January, they were spending lots of time talking about Duterte legacy, laying down the achievements of the administration so far, including, for example, the war on drugs, which they consider to be an achievement, and other things. But I think the pandemic response should be added to that. And what we're seeing right now is that the government really botched the pandemic response. There's no other way to put it. We have to call a spade a spade. And having said that, I think there's not really nothing we can do but battle on. And we hope that government should be pouring a lot more money on economic aid for workers, businesses in the coming months. And in fact, these economic aid programs should have been instituted months before, because we want the economy to recover as quickly as possible, but that will not happen if we let businesses die in the process and if we allow people to lose their jobs in the process. To be fair, there was some mention earlier about the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act. So this is a sequel of sorts to the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. But as I mentioned earlier, the economic aid there is just around 140 billion pesos, whereas some lawmakers in the House of Representatives are proposing in excess of 1 trillion pesos. And we need that amount of money, but the economic managers are not willing to spend for reasons I really couldn't fathom. But there, so we already know that President Duterte is not adept when it comes to economic issues, and we were hoping for some guidance from the economic managers right now, for example, Secretary Dominguez and Secretary Chu of NEDA and the others. But we will see, because I think that there are a number of stimulus, quote-unquote, packages in the pipeline, and some of them will be pushed faster than others as soon as the next week. So we have to watch out for that. But I'm raising red flags when it comes to that, because, for example, this could also be an opportunity for some politicians to insert their own interest into the upcoming stimulus packages. For example, the Arise Philippines bill in Congress, there have been certain provisions that have raised alarms because, for example, some corporations will allegedly be exempted from the Philippine Competition Act, and the Philippine Competition Commission will be enfeebled because of these provisions. So some people are fearing that in the next couple of months or years, this could actually pave the way for cronyism, some sort. So we have to watch out for that because some politicians have really looked at this crisis as an opportunity. So let's hope for the best. But yeah, we did not hear enough from President Duterte when it comes to the pandemic response and the economic response.
Maritas, ikaw, in terms of what you heard just now, state of our politics, the state of power politics, where are we?
I think my sense is the president is detached. He does not grasp the gravity, the urgency of the problem at hand. So he comforts himself with two things. First, the vaccine is around the corner, but that corner is not really that near. Number two, he said so many a million lives saved because of the lockdown. So he's seeking comfort in the vaccine, which is not, as Dr. Leachon said, it will take some time. And number two, lives saved because of lockdown. So I think the next 2 years, we will see him as a talking head without a grasp, especially of the economic situation also, because it will be downhill from now. We're in a recession, and as JC discussed, the government needs to pump out more money. So ang tingin ko, we have to rely, anong silver lining? I was trying to look for a silver lining. Siguro, some in the cabinet, but I think the LGUs, we just have to look at where the results are. Hindi na tayo pwedeng mag-rely on a talking head.
Okay.
That's interesting. Ralph, ikaw naman, you know, businessmen were looking at this. The economists were looking at this, like JC had said. How will businessmen react to what we just heard? What does it show ahead?
Well, yesterday, several business groups have actually asked President Duterte to tackle kung ano nga ba yung gagawin sa ekonomiya. Fiscal business groups were for the House version of the economic stimulus package worth 1.3 trillion pesos. So I don't recall the amount kung binanggit ba niya, but I think he was for the 140 billion. I'll get back to you on that. I'll just read up kung ano yung sinabi niya talaga sa speech. But I don't know. It doesn't. Me as a business reporter, parang I gotta, alam mo yan, parang maghahanap ka ng bits on what he told sa SONA about the economy. Well, he did mention about ano ba to, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and Land Bank giving out loans, and then asking the landlords for malasakit na wag paalisin yung mga small businesses and be compassionate. But again, that has been done because of this pandemic. Big businesses, for instance, I reported on Aboitiz, they extended the 50% discount sa economic zones nila for rent for the next 5 months, if I'm not mistaken, 5 months at least. So there's that. So, and let's also not forget that the government had several statements regarding mass testing, that they leave it up to the private sector. Presidential advisor for entrepreneurship, Joey Concepcion, has Project ARC. It involves many companies, big ones like Enrique Razon's, the Alialas, the Zubels rather. They've been testing employees every 2 weeks. And spokesman Harry Roque said na 'di ba, hindi kaya yung ganun karami na yung buong population or at least a big chunk of the population would be tested. So sinabi niya sa briefings niya that he leaves it up to the private sector. So for President Duterte to take a swipe at the private sector. So I don't know about that. I don't know about that, Maria.
Very, very. Yeah, because he certainly relied on them now, right? So, Dr. Leotron, coming back to you. First of all, it is a pleasure to listen to the way you deliver truths devoid of any emotion. It's wonderful to listen to you. So, tell us now, given what you heard, or the state of our ability to deal with this pandemic. How prepared are we? What's gonna be the next phase? Because your reaction was what you would have wanted, but that wasn't quite what we got.
As a clinician and looking at on a white paper, devoid of any political colors, just plain science and medicine. Well, in leading change, I think as a doctor, I would establish a sense of urgency. So there must be timeline. There must be short term, medium term, and long term. I would create a guiding coalition of medical experts, epidemiologists, the medical communities on board right now, PMA, the Philippine College of Physicians, the infectious disease, the academic institutions, you call in the UST, and all the other institutions, and then the economic experts. Then develop again another vision and strategy, perhaps a 1-week summit here, and then communicate the change vision, and then empower the broad-based coalition and working together, and then divide this into teams and then give them separate express lanes and no bottleneck at the IATF or with Secretary Duque. And then generate short-term wins to inspire people. And then perhaps on a monthly basis, there will be a town hall meeting. And then consolidate all the gains and produce more changes and try to anchor on the new approaches into the culture. Now, as a leader, I would say, I think the president is trying his best to inspire the people. But I think the flow and the structure of the speech was not really cut for him, knowing that he meanders a lot during the discussion. But lastly, I'd like to tell that every leader, knowing that stakes right now are very high, and the legacy of the Duterte administration will actually be banking on the penultimate SONA. I would wish the president that he deals with adversity with a powerful speech and show the people on how he would bounce back by the words of a real patriot that captivated the people 4 years ago. Yun sana ang gusto kong makita, and a humble and a more sympathetic and a more compassionate leader.
We really would love to see that as well, which is why I'll bring this back to Marites. Your reaction, Dr. Leachon laid out, in a perfect world, that would be what it is, right? But we've also known that politics has curtailed facts. People have not spoken up in quite the same way Dr. Leachon has. What we've also seen in the last few months is a consolidation of power. Marites, how will this play out? Where are we going to be, do you think, in the next few months, given the larger context?
I think we're going downhill from here economically, and we're not seeing effective responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are so many lessons to learn from our neighbors. We don't need, Duterte cited the US. It's a bad example. Of course, they're doing so poorly. But he could look at the lessons from Thailand, from Taiwan, from Vietnam, from South Korea. But I think we're too late. That's why I don't know if with Secretary Duque there and with 3 or 4 czars, I really don't understand how this can move if you have too many czars. And are they being listened to by DOH? Is the bureaucracy moving? Duterte said we have 93 test labs. That's an achievement already. But if you look at Vietnam, they started from 3 labs And in 2 or 3 months, they had over 100, which means they did not sleep. They mobilized people. But here, no, it's so slow. So Dr. Leachon said, wala ngang sense of urgency. So talagang ako, tumitingin ako sa LGUs. Tsaka yung testing, I think Magalong may be able to help.
Yeah.
Listen to.
I have to ask you about China, because he also slipped in that he had spoken to President Xi Jinping about the vaccine. You know, he obviously felt closer to China than he did to the United States. I mean, given the context of we have a Secretary of Foreign Affairs who has finally taken action and taken that ruling and taken it somewhere. What do you think this will mean, Maritas? You follow that closely.
Oh, yes. No, it's his, Duterte's foreign policy is an extension of his personal likes, of his friends. So he's very comfortable with Xi Jinping. So it just shows, we talked 4 days ago and I asked for preferential access to the vaccine instead of sourcing from as many countries as we can. There's UK, US, Thailand is also developing its own. And, short of the vaccine, Taiwan is developing an antibody, a medicine, which will cure the COVID-19 98%. So hindi niya nakikita yung buong picture kasi tatawag lang sila kay Xi Jinping. Yun yung comfort zone niya. So hindi na siya magbabago. Kung saan siya komportable, doon lang kikilos. So hindi natin narinig na siya ba is he going to ask ASEAN to mobilize ASEAN so that ASEAN can negotiate as a bloc with European companies, with the US, with China. Anyway, I'm so stressed out on this.
Okay, so joining us into the conversation is Mara Cepeda, our House reporter. Mara, your thoughts about the president's SONA?
I think that the president, I primarily focused on the priority bills of the president. And I did notice that a majority of the bills that he's asking Congress to pass are all about long-term response to the crisis. The first three are actually economic stimulus packages. And for example, the Bayanihan 2, it's actually a COVID-19 response and recovery program, an extension of the Bayanihan law, which already expired. And nakasalang na ito sa Kongreso. It already passed on second reading in the Senate. In the House, it already passed in the committee level. And the Speaker has actually already committed to passing this bill. The other two bills, the CREATE, which is the CITIRA bill, was already passed by the House, Senate na lang. Pati yung proposed FIS Act, the House was already able to pass that bill. Senado na lang din yung hinihintay. So I am expecting Congress to be able to pass these economic recovery related bills. Magkakatalo na lang tayo doon sa kung magkano man yung propose, i-adapt ba yung sa Senate or i-adapt ba yung sa House. But I think it's important for us to note that even if a majority of the 22 bills that the president is asking Congress to pass is a response to the pandemic, he spoke passionately about going after the oligarchs. And as a House reporter, this is something that I have been anticipating since the pandemic started, because after the House Committee on Legislative Franchises refused to renew the franchise of ABS-CBN, the House Committee on Good Government and Public Accountability started probing into Meralco. And the way they were conducting those hearings is they seem to be tracing it back to the Lopezes, which originally had a stake in Meralco. So meron ganon. They will go after our power companies, our water concessionaires, and they will go after the families, the tycoons behind it. And this is not surprising to me. The president has long been against the Ayalas, recently the Lopezes. And after the ABS-CBN shutdown, nagkakaroon na ng anti-oligarchy narrative. And this is echoed by the speaker himself. So I'm seeing, particularly in the House, lawmakers will have to divide. I don't know if the proper word is distract. They will be distracted. So apart from passing the COVID response bills, which we really need. And it's quite comprehensive in terms of the president wants, for example, emergency centers or evacuation centers to be created in every city, in every municipality, which is important. But long-term ito, congressmen and congresswomen will also be forced to respond to the president's quite strong feelings against these powerful business figures, powerful clans. So I don't think this is something that we should be looking into during a pandemic, but it's what the presidents want. And at least in the House, what Duterte wants, he will likely get.
So most likely, we'll see a probe in Globe and Smart amid the pandemic.
It's very likely that that's going to happen. If Duterte will tell the House leadership behind the scenes, go after Smart, go after Globe, they will do it. And the thing is, the president didn't even have to hold a caucus or ask the speaker to hold a caucus among all congressmen to shut down ABS-CBN. He just had to repeatedly say it in speeches at the delivery mo congressmen. So if I'm the owner of Smart, if I'm the owner of Globe, I will be very worried. And I guess if they do not comply with the president's ultimatum today that they have to fix their signals, they can expect that lawmakers will begin probing them too.
Okay, thanks so much, Mara, for your insights. I think we have Rambo Talabong as well joining us in the conversation. So Rambo, anong takeaway mo dito sa SONA ni President Duterte?
Well, kasi I cover the police and also human rights and the war on drugs. For me, it was quite surprising that his mention of the war on drugs was in passing. I think kwento lang niya na, okay, ito yung family. Kung nawala ang tatay, wala na ang buong pamilya. In one sentence, parang walang bago. Inuulit lang talaga yung sinasabi niya for the past few SONAs na patuloy lang ang war on drugs at mahalaga talaga yung kanyang proyekto. Pero wala siyang direktiba dun, nakatulad ng mga nakaraang SONA na gawin nating unrelenting, gawin nating patuloy ang gera kontra droga. Pero nakita rin kasi natin sa mga nakaraang buwan na kahit na may lockdown, patuloy pa rin ang kanyang war against drugs. Respect on human rights, kanyang pinapaglaban, pero kasi siyang pagkakaintindi at saka itinutulak na punto tungkol sa human rights na mas mahalaga ang kalayaan sa droga, kalayaan sa kriminalidad kaysa sa mismong kalayaan sa kamatayan, kalayaan sa pagsususpetsa ng gobyerno sa isang tao na sangkot sa droga. Sinabi talaga niya na mas mahalaga talaga sa aking administrasyon na hindi tayo involved sa drugs at saka sa kriminalidad. At ang mga tao, ang mga suspects na mga mismong users at saka nagbebenta ng droga, papatayin ko kayo. At sabi niya, quote, it is a commitment. So, nananakot pa rin siya, patuloy pa rin yung kanyang pananakot. Isang strategiya tungkol sa kanyang gera kontra droga na papatayin at saka ang mga pulis ay kakatok sa iyo kung ikaw ay bahagi ng sindikato o dito mismo sa paggamit at pagbebenta. Wala pa rin, katulad na rin ng mga nakaraang SONA, yung komprehensibong pagkakaintindi at saka pagpapaliwanag ng plano para itigil ang droga. Paulit-ulit na rin ito sinasabi sa kanya kahit ng mga opisyal ng Department of Health at saka ng DILG na dapat holistic ang pagtingin sa gera kontra droga. Pero nakita natin sa kanyang SONA na iisa pa rin ang kanyang pagkakaintindi, kanyang pinapahayag na dapat takutin at saka dapat law enforcement ang magwagi para matigil ang gera kontra droga. Ralph?
So, I don't know, the last time parang human rights versus human lives, and now he's saying that he's pro-human rights, di ba? So, do you think that yung probe ng UN or those kinds of developments affected his yung tone?
Ralph, we're seeing a direct address of Duterte himself on the issue that's raised by UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet. The main point asserted by Michelle Bachelet on her report is that the killings have been really systematic and it has been enabled by President Duterte. What we're seeing with the President Duterte's address now is that he doesn't really care. He values the protection of Filipinos against criminality, against drugs, but that comes at the expense of the life, sometimes or 1,000 of times in his campaign, of drug suspects.
Okay, thanks so much, Rambo. Now, Maria, final thoughts about the SONA of President Duterte?
It's fascinating to listen because, again, these are the same themes. It's great to hear Rambo's thoughts also. These are the same themes that the president has come out with in the last 4 years. But what he didn't touch on truly are things like freedom of the press, the chilling effect, right? Because certainly he talked about ABS-CBN and the Lopezes as oligarchs. That is a refrain from the 70s. So, and let me speak from personal experience. We have court cases, 2 this week, right? A month ago on June 15th, I and former colleague Ray Santos were convicted of cyber libel, a retroactive application of this law. Coming up on Wednesday, we have another tax evasion case where we're presenting a witness. And then on Thursday, I'm appearing at a Makati prosecutor's office. There's clearly something wrong with the government's efforts to hang a Damocles sword on journalists. And that is also clearly preventing or making the risks of telling truth to power, of demanding accountability, far harder than it has ever been in the time I've been a reporter, and that will be 35 years by next year.
Okay, so final thoughts. Doc Tony.
Well,
silver lining, Dr. Tony.
Huh?
Silver lining.
Well, this SONA, no matter how we think about it, for all of us who would try to think na the president would stand out, and for those of us na trying to make a sense lang of the SONA, no matter how many people around have no power to fit in. Like ako, gusto kong tumulong sa kanya. But I think the SONA, whether it's meaningful to you or not, is for all those who still hope for new mornings and new horizons. And no matter how long and cold and gloomy the nights for the healthcare workers and the LSIs and the OFW, this SONA, whether you like it or not, is for you. And this is for me and my family. And this is for everyone who still have some kind of hope for this country. I think we need to be inspired regardless of the speech or regardless of our leaders for the flag. No matter how many times in this lifetime or in these 4 years, we have to prove them sometimes wrong that we can still step up as private citizens. And let's think about our role as a private citizen, that we can still do something for this country. And we just need to be moving forward regardless of the type of leaders, particularly the IATF that we have. We just need to brace and hang on. And then I always believe in silver linings. Always. Thank you. Thank you. And lastly, thank you for the medical frontliners. I think sobrang hirap ninyo. And also for, of course, the government leaders who are sincerely helping out for this country. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. Thank you.
Yes. Now, JC, takeaways, final thoughts?
So, as for silver linings, it's quite difficult from an economic viewpoint. It's near impossible, but I will take a stab at it. So I think I would just say that we can still minimize the economic damage. So we're in the middle of a recession. The projections are grim, but things could be a lot worse. But we can still minimize the damage. But that will only happen if the economic managers get their priorities right. And so far, it doesn't seem that they got their priorities right. For example, they're gunning for tax cuts and infrastructure spending. But I'm not too sure that these are the best ways for our economy to get out of this rut. You have to remember that 2/3 of our economy runs on consumption spending. And consumption spending relies a lot on people's confidence to buy things, to go out and buy stuff. Okay, and you can only do that if you can bring down the number of new cases of COVID-19 to a minimum, to a bare minimum, if not zero, just like many other ASEAN countries have already done. So until we can bring down the cases, so again, this goes back to the idea of prioritizing the health crisis first before the economic crisis. So until you bring down the number of COVID-19 cases to a bare minimum, you cannot boost people's confidence, and you cannot expect the economy to grow out of this rut, no matter how loose the quarantine restrictions are. Because, for example, if you go out right now, the quarantine restrictions are looser, but there are fewer people in the malls, for example, or eating in restaurants. You can see that people are hesitating to buy things. And until we solve the health crisis, you can't expect the economic recovery to be anytime soon. So we just have to insist that the economic managers get their priorities right, and we can still minimize the damage.
Okay, Ma'am Marites, silver linings.
Nasa hair ko na yung silver linings. So, I think I said earlier, I really am elated when I read stories about local leaders who are doing very well, very effective in their responses to COVID-19. You know, so nagsashine sila in their own localities. Sa akin, it's something that's comforting. And pangalawa, I think, you know, to give credit to a national official also has been doing a lot is the vice president. She's not being listened to by the president or maybe government, but going over what she has done. Her office has the most, I think, has the least budgets, lowest budget. Yet she was able to do a lot. So nakikita ko, kaya pala if there is political will, the government can do more than what it's doing now. So yun, there's still hope, but yeah, it's hard. It's as JC says, baka yung silver lining na hanggang dito na lang sa mga buhok natin. Okay, thank you. Of course, thank you to everyone has been doing. I mean, private sector, we know naman, we know who are doing their part.
Okay, so I guess that wraps up our. Yeah, Maria.
Can I just add one last thing? And first of all, thank you to our panelists, because it is the best that we had different, varying from the sectors that truly matter right now. There was not a sense of urgency in that sense, right? I mean, Dr. Leah-Chan, we want to be as constructive as well, because where the president goes, we all go, right? And so we do want to be helpful, but the problem is that if we don't have the facts, and I guess that goes right back to the very first thing you said, if he doesn't have the facts as the final decision maker, how can we find the right solutions in a very nuanced and interlocking pattern? This isn't linear. And so I hope that many, many, many more people will speak, will demand facts, will demand truth. Yun lang. Thank you everybody for joining us. Ralph.
Yeah, so for those that are watching that missed the president's speech, or I don't know, for some that on purpose skip the speech and just want to to read up on the analytical pieces, visit our website, Rappler.com. We are now powered by Lighthouse. We have a bold look and a very different layout that makes it easier to navigate. So watch out for our analytical pieces, our bite-sized stories about the president's speech. I'm Ralph Rivas with Maria Ressa. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Keep safe.
You too. Bye-bye.